Chapter 620. On the second day, Gongsun Zhang came to the Chi-Dragon ship alone. After greeting Zhang Yan, he said apologetically, "What a coincidence! After I returned to the city, my master was in seclusion, so it was inconvenient for me to come and meet you in person. Please forgive me, but I have brought everything you need, spiritual master." He shook his sleeve and released a cloud of milky white smoke, carrying out dozens of jade boxes. Each box was half a foot square and neatly stacked in the cabin. Then, he took out a bundle of books from his sleeve and handed it over with one hand. Because the number of these rare treasures is really not less than 10,000. "Is it true that you are a bad person and you are a tree branch in a flash?" Zhang Yan immediately took it, and with a point of his finger, he untied the knot of the red silk. He slowly opened the binding sheet, and his gaze wandered around. After a while, he looked at Gongsun Zhang and nodded. "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, thank you." Gongsun Zhang, who had been paying attention to Zhang Yan's expression, relaxed and said, "There are a total of 186 items that Jinren needs. Among them, 113 can be found in our celestial gathering city. As for the remaining 73 items, our celestial gathering sect is, after all, just a lonely city in the middle of the sea, so we are unable to find them. However, the Great Chu country, which is thousands of miles away, has a vast territory with abundant resources and abundant people. It is also the place where the Zhongtai sect was established, so it is 10 times better than our celestial gathering sect. The immortal city in the continent of the East Victory continent was just like a prefecture in the mortal world, and it was a place that was accessible from all directions. Besides some treasures of the heavens and the earth that could only be chanced upon by luck, ordinary treasures could be gathered as long as a cultivator was able to pay the price. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If that's the case, then I'll have to go and see for myself." While the two of them were talking, the Wang sisters took the opportunity to check the contents of the jade box against the bindings. Finally, he said, "Benevolent teacher, not even a little bit off." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said to Gongsun Zhang, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, how much are these precious materials worth?" Gongsun Zhang bowed and said, "Zhenren Zhang, everything here is a gift from my city lord. There's no need to discuss the price." A foreign Yuanian cultivator was loitering in the celestial Civ sect's territory. The city lord, Gongsun Su, could not help but feel uneasy. He also saw that although Zhang Yan needed a wide variety of items, they were all rare. Thus, he was prepared to suffer some losses. He wanted to get rid of this matter as soon as possible. Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun must be joking. How can I take it for free?" After thinking for a while, he took out a jade box and used his magic power to send it down. Gongsun Zhang subconsciously reached out to take it. He looked inside. He discovered that the box was filled with tiny beads the size of rice grains. Every single one of them was round, plump, translucent, and bright, and dazzling. He couldn't help but reveal a look of shock. The reason why the celestial Civ city was prosperous in the past was because of the deep-sea spirit shells that were collected from the North Mo and West GCs. However, compared to the spirit shells that were nurtured by the mountains and rivers, sea shells were far from the spirit shells that were nurtured by the mountains and rivers, not to mention these 1 in 100 shell pearls. Just this box alone was worth more than 100,000 seashells. It was more than enough to buy all the precious materials in front of him. He weighed the box of shell pearls in his hand and hesitated for a while before saying carefully, "Zhenren, you've given me too much." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, you've gone through a lot of trouble. Previously, because of a misunderstanding, my disciple had rashly chopped off one of your arms. The rest is a gift to you as an apology." Of course, he could take these medicinal materials for free, but doing so would make the celestial Civ sect somewhat dissatisfied. He didn't come back to Dongxing for a short while. He was ordered by the sect master to find a way to establish a foothold here. The fact that the celestial Civ city was able to stand here for thousands of years and go through 2 major changes in a row without being forcibly occupied by others showed how deep its foundation was. It wasn't as simple as it looked on the surface. If he left a bad impression, it would definitely affect his subsequent actions, so there was no need to take advantage of this small advantage. Gongsun Zhang was stunned for a while and looked at the shell pearls in his hand. After a while, he put them away, then cupped one hand and said sincerely, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang, for your generous gift." Although he was a small gold core cultivator, he had only entered the Tao for about 200 years. If he could cleanse himself with the elixir concocted by the 7-leaves Xuanzhen grass, he would still have some hope of reaching the Yuanying realm. However, this kind of spiritual grass was really expensive, and he still lacked a lot of what he had accumulated over the years. Now that he had the pen and the jade pearls, he could just about make up for what he lacked before. At this moment, Zhang Yan took out a letter that was sealed with a restrictive spell and threw it down. He said, "It's a pity that your castellan is not available. I will leave for Chu country in a few days. I'll pay you a visit in the future. Please pass this letter on to me." Gongsun Zhang hurriedly reached out and took it. Seeing that Zhang Yan had the intention to send him off, he stood up and bowed, saying goodbye and leaving. After getting out of the Dragon Country ship, he suddenly thought, "If I destroy the letter and secretly swallow these jade pearls, I think no one will know." However, as soon as this thought appeared, his whole body shivered and immediately extinguished it. Judging from Zhang Yan's words, he would still come back to visit the sect in the future. Even if there was no letter, there was still a possibility that it would be leaked. Moreover, this was an act of deceiving his master. If someone found out, there would be no place for him in the sect anymore. Thinking of this, he shook his head and cast a mysterious light, returning to the celestial gathering city. In the Dragon Country ship, Zhang Yan released a gust of strong wind and rolled the dozens of jade boxes into his sleeve. He said to his 2 female disciples, "After I change my flying magic tool, we'll be on our way." After traveling for another 10,000 miles, he would arrive at the Dongxing continent. However, not only was the Dragon Country's ship too eye-catching, but most of the restrictive spells were also damaged, so he couldn't fly anymore. Therefore, he had to find another vehicle. He took out the restriction talisman and waved it casually, putting the ship away first. Then, he made a hand seal and lightly tapped his teeth. After chanting a few incantations, a cloud of smoke came out of his sleeve and condensed into a cloud raft. There was a cloud tent on it, and it slowly rotated in the air. He didn't know which elder of the demon sect used to have this treasure, but he used it casually. After transforming it to 3 to 4 meters in size, he called Zhang Boyan and the Wang sisters over. Then, he activated his magic power, and the 4 of them flew toward the east at a moderate speed. After traveling for about 4 hours, they saw a young cultivator in front of them. This person was standing on a green leaf and saw a cloud raft. He was wearing a green robe and his cultivation was only at the clear chi stage. After seeing the cloud raft, he was stunned for a moment. After a while, he came up and shouted, "Is this an esteemed guest from the outer endless sea ahead? Let's keep our jade toes for now." When Zhang Yan heard this, he thought for a moment and used his magic power to hold the cloud raft down. He said to Wang Kading, "Disciple, go and ask what's the matter." Wang Kading responded and got off the cloud raft. She flew forward and said, "Who are you? Why are you looking for us?" The cultivator saw that he had found the right person and his face lit up. He bowed and said, "I am Shao Yin, a disciple of the Celestial Civ sect. I took the liberty to come here today to thank the seniors for saving my Shao clansmen yesterday." Wang Kading thought of the people he saved yesterday and said, "Oh, so you are from the same clan. It was nothing." Shao Yin raised his head and said seriously, "To the seniors it is a small matter, but to me, it is a great favor. I have to repay it. Today, I present a geomancy map of the 2 seas to express my gratitude. I hope you will accept it." He took out a scroll from his sleeve and held it over his head with both hands. However, Wang Kading snorted and said, "Your Celestial Civ sect is so dishonest. Previously, my master also asked Gongsun Zhang about the sea map, but he said he never had it. So it turns out he was lying to us." Shao Yin hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Senior, you've misunderstood. Martial Uncle Gongsun said there is no such thing, so there really is no such thing. This sea map of mine was drawn by my master when he was traveling. After my master passed away, it has been kept by me. Very few people know about it." Wang Keating glanced at him and gently raised her wrist to take the map from Xiao Yin's hand. She said, "Thank you, elder." Xiao Yin was happy to see him accept it. He bowed and said, "Then I won't delay the seniors any longer. I will take my leave now." After bowing again, he rode his flying leaf and flew across the sky. Wang Kaiwei picked up the scroll and patted it in her palm. She then turned back to the cloud raft and said, "Master, that Taoist sent a map." Zhang Yan took it and spread it out on the table. A ray of light rose from the map and revealed countless geographical figures. He scanned it and was surprised. He originally thought that this sea map was only the West Sea Jie. He didn't think that the North Sea Jie would be included as well. What was even rarer was that the cities, sects, and families along the coast of the Dongsheng continent, the products and population, as well as the distribution of the mountains and rivers were all indicated. The content was very detailed. However, when he looked further into the continent, it was blank. It didn't look like it was purposely erased. Rather, the person who drew the map didn't have time to finish drawing it. Although Taoist cultivators could find the place they wanted to go based on the general direction and the direction of the land veins, it still took a lot of effort. Especially in an unfamiliar place like the Dongsheng continent, it was even more difficult. However, with this map, it was much more convenient. Zhang Yan looked at the map for a while and found the location of the mountain gate. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Just this map is enough to make up for all the pill materials from before." At this time, he already had an idea in his heart, so he didn't delay any longer. He put away the map and cast a spell to speed up the cloud raft. He turned and headed northeast. The journey was calm. After 2 days, they arrived at the coastal sea of the Dongsheng continent. The sea was dotted with white sails and there were many boats coming and going. In front of them was the border of the Great Chu. There was a celestial city called Xingkang near the sea. There were cultivators from the Zhongtai sect guarding it. If cultivators from other continents entered the city, they would definitely come to check. Therefore, the group of people didn't go near but continued north along the coast. After another 5 days, they heard the sound of the river rushing. Looking around, they saw that the river was extremely wide. There were still many pieces of ice that hadn't melted in it that were washed into the sea with the water. According to the map, this river was called Reed Night. If they continued north for another 50 to 60,000 miles, they would reach the Beima Ocean world. And walking along this big river to the east, they would arrive at a place called Divine House Mountain. This mountain occupied the extreme north of the Dongsheng continent. From east to west, it stretched endlessly. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of miles it was. Zhang Yan stood on the cloud raft and raised his eyes to look. At the end of the horizon, what entered his eyes was a vast mountain range. White snow covered the top and the frosty cold sky. It was majestic and magnificent. If what Shen Baishuang said wasn't necessary, the mountain gate of the villa he built was in that mountain range. Chapter 621. P.S. There will be more at night. 300 years ago, Shen Baishuang, who was already in the 3rd stage of yuanying, was ordered by his master to go to Dongsheng continent to avoid internal strife. When he arrived at Shenwu Mountain, he saw that it was a spirit vein. The mountain was majestic, and because it was located in the extreme north of Dongsheng continent, it was not under the control of the 5 major sections. He expelled an evil sect and temporarily settled here. He built a cave and named it Hanyuan. After taking in disciples and passing on his skills for dozens of years, he went out to travel again and never returned since then. 200 years passed in the blink of an eye. The flowers and trees in the courtyard were not as colorful as they used to be. The ground was covered with fallen leaves. Inside the cave, on a flat green stone, sat a middle-aged Taoist with a kind face and big ears. In front of him stood a young cultivator who looked to be in his 20s. The middle-aged Taoist sighed and said, "Junior brother Gao, no one in the sect can compare to you in terms of aptitude. It won't be long before you form your dan, but for the sake of the sect's grand plan, I have no choice but to delay you for a few years. Do you blame me? The young cultivator said seriously, Senior brother sect leader, please don't say that. I, Gao Zhongyuan, am fortunate enough to be guided by senior brother sect leader to enter the sect. There is no way for me to repay your kindness. Why should I blame you? The middle-aged Taoist felt guilty and gratified. He sighed and said, It's rare. Junior brother, please go back first. I will give you an explanation. The young cultivator bowed and retreated. The middle-aged Taoist stood up and paced back and forth in the cave. He frowned and sighed from time to time, as if he was thinking about a difficult matter. After a long time, his eyes gradually revealed a sense of determination. At this time, a handsome cultivator with bright eyebrows and bright eyes rushed in. He shouted from 10 feet away, The disciples of Mount E are getting more and more arrogant. They dare to wander in front of our sect. Senior brother, we can't let this go on for long. You have to think of a plan. The middle-aged Taoist looked at him and said in a deep voice, Junior brother Wen, you came at the right time. I was looking for you about this matter. When the handsome cultivator heard this, he immediately became spirited. He sat down excitedly. Senior brother, have you made up your mind to fight against Mount E? I have already said that if you take a step back, you advance 10. We might as well fight it out. Life and death are up to fate. The middle-aged Taoist shook his head. He said, I was thinking about something. Did he agree to the request of the Emshan sect and give up this immortal's cave on Songju Peak? What? Junior brother Wen was stunned, then he stood up. He pointed at Taoist Chu and said furiously, Chu Muron, what nonsense are you spouting? How can Master's foundation be ruined in our hands? Taoist Chu looked at him with a calm expression and said, Junior brother, sit down and listen to what I have to say. Junior brother Wen glared at him for a while before sitting down heavily. Chu Taoist priest considered his words for a moment, then slowly said, Shitty, if En Shifu, the senior, is still here, no one would dare to bully our Han Yuan cave. But En Shifu has been gone for more than 200 years. Let's not talk about Mount E Pai, just look at the dozens of sects on this Shenwu mountain, which one of them does not covet my immortal's cave? There were many underground spirit veins in the cave of the hidden abyss. It was considered the best cave in the mountain world of the divine house. When Shen Baishuang was here, because he was a level 3 nascent soul cultivator, no one dared to have any ideas about him. But ever since he left, the sects around Songju Peak started to have their own ideas. If it weren't for the fact that they didn't know when Shen Baishuang would return, they wouldn't dare to be too brazen and would have long since attacked him. Junior brother Wen said in a muffled voice, Even so, we can't just give up the cave. Taoist Chu sighed, I didn't want to at first, but my master has been gone for a long time and hasn't returned. Junior brother, you know about the situation these years. Not to mention you and me, the younger generation of disciples can't cultivate. If the orthodoxy is broken, wouldn't we become the sinners of the sect? Junior brother Wen punched the stone table and said with hatred, If it was not for Mount E, how could this happen? If a sect wanted to continue, it had to recruit disciples and teach them Xian skills. This way, if the seniors of the sect passed away, they could reincarnate into the sect. But Han Yuan had not had a disciple enter the sect for 30 years. It was not that they did not want to accept disciples, but every time they were stopped by the sects outside the mountain led by the Mount Amei sect. They were the first to pick those with outstanding aptitudes. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that they were slowly destroying their foundation. Even if they were unwilling to give up the abode of the Immortal's cave, they could still achieve their goal once the lineage of Han Yuan was completely wiped out. Taoist Chu was originally very strong-willed, but the foundation of the Han Yuan sect was shallow. After fighting against them for 200 years, the situation was getting worse and worse, and there was no sign of Shen Baishuang turning around, so he also lost confidence. The cave was silent. After a while, Junior brother Wen said unwillingly, Let's wait for Junior brother Zhao to come back. Chu Daoist smiled bitterly and said, What Junior brother Zhao has brought with him is the last 10,000 spirit shells of our sect. Even if everything goes smoothly this time, The items we bring back will at most be enough for our 30 or so disciples to use for a year and a half. What should we do after that? Junior brother Wen said, we can drag it out for as long as we can. Who knows, Master might return to the sect by then. Chu Daoist shook his head and said, if you are not willing, I have another way. Junior brother Wen said anxiously, Senior brother, at this point, why are you still hiding it? Hurry up and say it. Chu Daoist said slowly, among us brothers, Junior brother Gao has the best aptitude. Those spirit shells were originally meant to be used as external medicine for him to condense his Dan. But this time, we have let him down. Luckily, he has no complaints. But we cannot delay him like this. I want to lend him the magical weapons that Master has given to us and order him to go out and search for opportunities. If he is able to break through to the state of Yuanying before our lives end, then we will not have to fear those people from Mount. Junior brother Wen's expression suddenly turned ugly. He then laughed coldly and said, you recognize him as your junior brother, but I do not. If anyone is to go, it should be one of us 3 brothers. Who does he think he is? Is he worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as us? I will not lend him my magical weapons. Gao Zhongyuan was not a disciple of Shen Baishuang. He was born in a declining family of cultivators. Because he accidentally received a meridian opening technique from Shen Baishuang, he came to the mountain 60 years ago to be apprenticed to Master Chu. Therefore, he was regarded as a brother by Chu Daoist. Because he did not enter the sect through proper means, he thought that Daoist Wen did not like him. Chu Daoist knew that this would be the result and did not continue to persuade him. He looked down and said, then the only way is to move the sect to avoid disaster. Junior brother Wen's tone was extremely cold. If you give up the abode, how are you going to explain to Master when he returns? Taoist Chu sat up straight and said in a serious tone, if Master returns, he will have his ways to take back the mountain gate. But if Master doesn't return, the disciples will lose their Tao and no one will inherit the orthodoxy. Then we will both be sinners. Junior brother Wen said angrily, the sect is the foundation of the sect. Even if all my disciples die, I will not hand it over to someone else. Chu Taoist also knew that it was impossible to persuade him immediately. He suddenly showed a tired look, waved his hand and said, all right, Shitty, you don't have to argue with me. Go back and think about it carefully, we'll discuss it another day. Junior brother Wen stood up and walked 2 steps away. Suddenly, he stopped and turned back. Senior brother, if you do anything behind my back, I will not agree to it. After saying that, he left with heavy footsteps. Chu Daoist let out a long sigh. At this moment, he suddenly saw a child poking his head in front of the entrance of the abode. He asked unhappily, what is it? The child said, Grand Master, there is a letter from Elder Zhao. Chu Daoist's face lit up and said, give it to me quickly. He had previously sent junior brother Zhao Ge out to buy external items for cultivation. Calculating the time, it was about time for him to return. After hurriedly taking the letter, he waved his hand and the child left. Chu Daoist took a deep breath and opened the letter. His face changed and his hands started to tremble. He said with a trembling voice, how could this be? How could this be? Who would do such an evil thing? Zhao Ji's letter did not bring good news. He mentioned that he had bought a lot of pills and xian seeds in the celestial city of Chu. It was supposed to be a smooth journey, but on his way back, he was attacked. Now, he was seriously injured and was recuperating in a secluded place. He could not return for a while. Chu Daoist immediately suspected that it was the work of the Mount E sect. He was thinking about how to get Zhao Ge back when he heard someone calling out to him outside the cave. He forced himself to pull himself together and said, what happened outside? A young disciple outside the door said, Master, there are 2 female cultivators outside the sect who came to visit. They said they want to see the sect master. Chu Daoist was puzzled. When Shen Baishuang was here, there were many cultivators who came to visit him. But after he left, such a situation rarely happened. He asked in a deep voice, what is the cultivation level of those 2? Can you tell where they came from? The disciple said, those 2 female cultivators are riding on light. Looking at their clothes, they don't look like they are from the Shenwu mountain world. Chu Daoist's heart skipped a beat. He pondered for a while and said, "Call your eldest Shixiang to greet them and find out more about them." Outside the mountain gate, the Wang sisters stood side by side. Because they were both beautiful and had the same appearance, they attracted the attention of the disciples guarding the gate. Wang Kaiwei looked at the surrounding scenery and praised, "Sister, look. Even though the cave that Jinren Shin chose is a bit desolate, it is rich in spiritual energy. It can be considered a blessed land." Wang Kading pouted and said, "Compared to the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake, it is still lacking." Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "The Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake was originally a place for people to cultivate. Back then, Master broke the formation alone and made a great contribution. That was why he was given this cave. This cave cannot be compared. For a place like the Dongsheng continent, I am afraid you can only look for it in the mountain gate of the 5 major sections. Don't be greedy." As the two of them were talking, they saw the formation of the mountain gate slowly open. A handsome Taoist came out riding on light. His gaze stopped on the two girls for a while. He came up and said, "I am Lin Xianchao, the eldest disciple of the Hanyuan sect. May I know which Taoist friend is here? Why do you want to see my master?" The Wang sisters looked at each other and smiled. Wang Kading took the initiative and went forward. She bowed and said, "So it is senior apprentice brother Lin. My daughter is Wang Kading and this is my sister, Wang Kaiwei. Today, we are here under the request of Jinren Shun from your sect." Chapter 622. Hearing the Wang sisters' intentions, Lin Xianchao didn't dare to make a decision on his own, so he sent someone inside to report. Reading a novel after Taoist Chu found out, he was both surprised and happy. He hadn't heard from Shen Baishuang for a long time, but if he returned this time, then all his problems would be solved. He asked around and found out that the two of them were only at the mystic light realm, so he didn't think too much and decided to meet them. He ordered a servant to light up the mystic incense and sweep the cave before inviting the two of them in. After sitting down, Taoist Chu and the Wang sisters chatted for a while before asking, "Where did you two come from?" Wang Kaiwei replied with a smile, "The two of us crossed the sea from the Donghua continent." Donghua continent? Taoist Chu couldn't help but be shocked. Although the Donghua continent and the Dongsheng continent belonged to the 3 eastern continents of the 9 provinces, they were extremely far away from each other and were separated by the Thundercloud Ocean. It wasn't easy for normal cultivators to cross over. He pondered for a while and said, "Just now, the two of you are here on the request of our sect's founding master. Forgive me, Daoren, for asking, did you two meet him in the Donghua continent?" Wang Kaiwei was surprised and said, "Could it be that Shin Jinren never told sect master Chu about his background?" Taoist Chu felt a bit awkward and said, "I'm ashamed. As disciples, we are too useless. Our teacher didn't tell us which sect he is from." The two sisters suddenly understood. However, Shen Baishuang once said that the disciple he took in the Dongsheng continent was only an in-name disciple, so it was reasonable that he didn't tell them about his background. But now, it wasn't convenient to hide it. Wang Kaiwei said directly, "Shen Jinren is an elder of the Donghua continent's Qinsong school. He has a very high status in our sect and is the sect master's junior brother." Taoist Chu had cultivated for more than 200 years, but the furthest place he had been was the Chu country. He had never heard of the Qinsong school's fame. He asked around a little. The Wang sisters didn't know Zhang Yan's intentions, so they didn't explain too much. However, just the bits and pieces that they revealed made Taoist Chu dumbfounded. Unknowingly, even his attitude became more humble. He cupped his hands and said, "May I know how to address my master?" Wang Kaiwei said with a smile, "According to seniority, Kading and I should call him Grand Marshal Uncle." Taoist Chu nodded and hesitated for a moment. He cautiously asked, "May I know what my master has entrusted to the two of you?" Wang Tsaiwei's charming face turned solemn as she said, "I'm afraid we'll have to invite sect leader Chu to meet my master in person to know the details." Taoist Chu's expression turned cold as he cupped his hands and asked, "May I know where your master is?" Wang Kaiwei said, My family's benevolent master is currently on the west side of Tsangju Peak. I stopped at a dangerous peak 100 miles away. Chu Daoist hesitated for a while. He could not confirm whether what the two said was true or false. After talking for a long time, the other party did not take out any tokens. He was not sure if he should go out and meet them, so he gave a look to a child at the door. The child understood his meaning. He said, "Sect leader, it's time to take the pill." Daoist Chu said apologetically to the Wang sisters, "Please wait for a moment. Daoren has some matters to attend to, I'll be back soon." Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "Sect leader Chu, please go ahead." Daoist Chu took his leave. He went to another cave dwelling and ordered someone to summon Daoist Wen. After he sat down, he told him the whole story. In the end he asked, "Junior martial brother, what do you think I should do about this?" Daoist Wen had been looking forward to Shen Baishuang's return day and night. Now that he heard the news, how could he hold it in? He said in a bad mood, "Senior martial brother, what are you waiting for? Are you afraid that someone will trick us? It's not that I want to belittle our prestige, but with the current situation in the sect, how bad can it be?" Daoist Chu was startled and seemed to have been enlightened. He stood up and said, "That's right, I'm thinking too much. Junior martial brother, guard the sect tightly, I'll go and meet that senior martial brother." He strode back to his immortal's cave and happily left the mountain gate with the Wang sisters. After traveling 100 miles to the west, he saw a cloud raft on a mountain peak. There were 2 Taoists on it, and one of them looked handsome and extraordinary. There seemed to be strong clouds floating above his head. He couldn't help but be shocked. Yuanyin cultivator? He saw that the Wang sisters were only at the mystic light realm, so he guessed that their master's cultivation was similar to his, but he didn't expect that he was wrong. One must know that in the Dongsheng continent, a Yuanyin cultivator was enough to shock an area. Emshan sect had an elder who became a Yuanyin cultivator, which was why they could be so arrogant. Daoist Chu's gaze turned to the side of Zhang Yan, and he was shocked when he saw that it was an elder who was covered in smoke. There were also strong clouds rumbling above his head. It was obvious that it was another Yuanyin cultivator. He was intimidated by the aura of the two, and he actually didn't dare to go forward. Zhang Yan saw his expression and he smiled. He cupped his hands and said from afar, "Are you sect Master Chu? I, Qinsong Zhang Yan, greet you." Daoist Chu came back to his senses and hurriedly returned the greeting. He said respectfully, I don't dare, I don't deserve your greeting." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I believe my 2 disciples have already told sect Master Chu about I's background." Yes, Daoist Chu said carefully, "I'm here to ask sect Master Zhang, what instructions does my master have for me?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Martial Uncle Shen asked me to come here to take over Han Yan's cave dwelling. From now on, this Tsangju Peak will be my Qinsong School's other residence." Daoist Chu was stunned. He didn't expect that Shen Baishuang would actually make such an arrangement. He couldn't react for a moment. After a while, he said hesitantly, I wonder if you have a token to prove it?" He didn't doubt Zhang Yan. In fact, after seeing the latter, he believed 80% of his identity. With the 2 Yuanyin cultivators here, if they had any malicious intent towards Deep Cave Sect, who could stop them? There was no need to go through so much trouble. Moreover, to be able to have a relationship with a big sect like Qinsong School was also what he wanted. However, he couldn't just hand over the entire sect to the other party with just one sentence. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I came out in a hurry, so I do have a token. However, I have a talisman that Martial Uncle Shen gave me. I wonder if you recognize it?" He opened his palm, and a golden light shot out and rushed up 1/2 foot high. Inside, a pagoda-like golden cover appeared. Under the sunlight, there were 7 precious pearls that shone with a dazzling light. Daoist Chu's eyes widened when he saw it. He then said excitedly, "That's right, this is the treasure that my master always carried with him." Seeing that there was no mistake, he didn't hesitate anymore. He tidied up his robe and bowed respectfully to Zhang Yan. He said, "Chu Mu Ran greets sect leader Xixiang. I hope you can forgive me for my disrespect earlier." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt his heart lighten up. The position of sect leader was indeed not easy. He had worked hard for more than 200 years, painstakingly managing the affairs of the sect, and even his own cultivation had been delayed. But now, he could finally put down the heavy burden on his shoulders. Zhang Yan went forward and helped him up. He said, "Junior Marshal Brother Chu, you don't have to be so polite." Taoist Chu suddenly thought of something. He grabbed Zhang Yan's sleeve and begged, "Sect leader Shixiang, please spare my junior marshal brother Zhao's life." Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. He asked, "What happened?" Taoist Chu told him about his junior marshal brother Zhao Gu being severely injured outside. In the end, he said, "Junior marshal brother Zhao is an honest man. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't hold on any longer, he wouldn't have sent a letter to ask for help." Zhang Yan nodded his head solemnly. He said, "Since he's a disciple of Qinsong, it's only right for me to go and save him. I wonder what junior marshal brother Zhao looks like and where he is now." Taoist Chu took out a talisman from his chest and said, "This talisman has a trace of junior marshal brother Zhao's breath on it. It can help sect leader Shixiang locate him." Zhang Yan took it and turned to Zhang Boyan. He said, Zhang, I'll leave it to you." Zhang Boyan didn't say much. After taking the talisman, he cupped his hands and bowed. Then, he leaped up and turned into a yellow smoke that disappeared into the sky. Taoist Chu saw that Zhang Yan said he would go and save junior marshal brother Zhao without any intention of rejecting him. He said gratefully, "Thank you, sect leader Shixiang." Zhang Yan smiled. "We're of the same lineage. Junior marshal brother, you don't have to call me sect leader. You can just call me Manor Lord." Taoist Chu hurriedly nodded his head in agreement. He then said, "This isn't the territory of my cave of hidden smoke. It's not convenient to talk here. Manor Lord, please follow us." Zhang Yan nodded his head in agreement. Taoist Chu led the way and led the group back to the cave. He then ordered a boy to serve tea and fruits. He said, "Would Manor Lord like to see the disciples in the sect?" Zhang Yan smiled at him. "That's fine." Taoist Chu immediately called all the disciples in the sect, including Taoist Wen. They all went up to greet Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan looked down and saw that there were a total of 37 people. More than half of them had not opened their meridians. There were only 8 clear Qi disciples and only 3 disciples had entered the mystic light realm. One of them was the eldest disciple who welcomed the Wang sisters into the sect, Lin Xianchao. The other was a female disciple called Jiang Rou. The last one was Shen Baishuang's disciple, Gao Zhongyuan. Shen Baishuang took in more than 60 disciples in the past. Only 3 of them entered the core transformation realm. The rest of them died of old age. Those who survived had already left the mountain and reincarnated. When Zhang Yan saw that one of these disciples had entered the sect in the past few decades, he knew that there must be a reason for this. He casually commented a few words and dismissed the disciples. He then turned to Taoist Wen and said, "The Divine House Mountain is the highest place in the Dongxing continent. Songzhu Peak is the first peak here. It is covered in ice and snow all year round. I heard that if you stand on the peak, you can see the Beima ocean world that is tens of thousands of miles away. Junior Marshal Brother Wen, are you willing to take me there?" Junior Marshal Brother Wen was startled. He then laughed and said, "So Senior Marshal Brother is a refined person. Please follow me." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He left the Wang sisters behind and left with Taoist Wen. After the two of them left, Taoist Chu's mood was much better than before. He asked the Wang sisters, "How many disciples does the mansion master have?" Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "Master has 7 disciples. This time he only brought me and my sister." Taoist Chu stroked his beard and said, "Both of you have excellent aptitudes. You must be the mansion master's proudest disciples." Wang Kading interrupted at this time, "In terms of aptitudes, how can we compare to Senior Marshal Sister? She has already condensed her magic power and true seal and reached the 3rd stage of the core transformation realm. Even my 6th junior marshal brother, although he entered the sect very late, he has already entered the core transformation realm before us." Taoist Chu was amazed when he heard this. Just Zhang Yan's disciples had a similar cultivation base as him. His evaluation of Zhang Yan rose by a level. He thought to himself, with this senior martial brother Zhang here, our deep stream sect might be able to regain its former glory. Chapter 623. P.S. Today is the first time Zhang Yan walked around the Zhangzhou Peak for a night and checked the inside and outside of the cave. He had a clear understanding of the situation here. The Han Yuan Cave covered an area of about 30 acres. There was a large hall halfway up the mountain used to gather disciples and teach them martial arts. There were also more than 100 houses, but most of them were not cleaned or protected. Therefore, most of the roof tiles were broken and covered with cobwebs. Not only did it not look like a Taoist sect, but it also gave off an aura of decay. Chu Mu Ran could not be blamed for this. In truth, Chu Mu Ran couldn't be blamed for this. Shen Baishuang didn't put much thought into this matter back then. After he left, the mountain gate lost its biggest pillar of support. It was already difficult to maintain it until now, so how could he have the time to care about the uninhabited places scattered around the mountain? All of this was actually a trivial matter to cultivators. However, as a Dao cultivation sect, it had been a few tens of years since a disciple had entered the sect, and they even lacked all the external materials required for cultivation, so it was a matter of life and death. If it was in the Donghua continent, it would not be a problem. Not to mention the 10 sects of Xianmen, even the second and third-rate sects and aristocratic families were equipped with jade elixir flower pools and spiritual shells. Even if the disciples closed their doors for 100 years, they could still cultivate without any problems. However, this did not work in the Dongshun continent. If the cultivators here needed items, they could only go to the Celestial City to buy them. The person in charge of the Celestial City in the Divine House Mountain was Zhenren Yuanying from the Emshan sect. Therefore, Taoist Chu had to send disciples to the Celestial City in the Chu Kingdom to buy things. However, because the distance was too far, it was very risky. If they were not careful, they could easily be killed by evil cultivators. Junior brother Zhao almost lost his life this time. All in all, the Han Yuan Cave could be said to be under pressure from both inside and outside. If Zhang Yan had come 10 years later, even the Taoist tradition would have been severed. Zhang Yan stood at the peak and looked at the rising sun. He could not help but think, since the sect master ordered me to open a sect here, it seems that I will have to stay in the Dongshun continent for another 100 or 200 years. I must manage this place well. He said to Wang Kading, who was standing behind him, "Disciple, go and invite junior brother Chu here." Wang Kading responded and flew away on the mysterious light. Not long after, Taoist Chu hurried over. Zhang Yan said, "I invited junior brother here because I have a few things to tell you." Taoist Chu said respectfully, "Chief, please tell me." Zhang Yan, "I see that the area is too small and it is too cramped. It is not appropriate for a master and disciple to live in the same place." When Priest Chu heard this, he secretly scolded himself. How could he not have thought of this? "Junior brother," Chu said. "Junior Shin," Zhanghua said. "Sect masters of Zhenren Yen, Celestial," he said. "Junior brother, I, sect master of Cheese, Zhang, sect, Zhang of. Junior you are of. Junior martial brother Chu, it's better for you to keep that cave for yourself." Priest Chu was surprised and asked a few more questions. Only then did he know that Zhang Yan wanted to build a few more cave residences in the mountain. In his heart, however, he was grumbling bitterly. He didn't expect this manor lord to care about his reputation so much. The construction of the palace required spiritual wood, stone, jade, and glass. This was not a small expense, but how could he take out the spirit shell now? However, this was the first time the manor head had arrived, so how could he go against the manor head's wishes? After pondering for a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "Yes, I will definitely get this done." The reason why Zhangzhou Peak was so named was because there were dozens of thousand-year-old Zhangzhou trees growing on the mountain. Taking a branch from one of these trees, it could be used to refine magic treasures and flying boats. However, 100 years ago, when the disciples of Hanyuan sect fought with the disciples of Mount E sect, they won more than half of them. The remaining 3 saplings could be considered safe because they were within the mountain gate. However, without the spiritual liquid to water them, it would probably take a few hundred years for them to mature. Right now, he had no choice but to place his attention on them. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This matter is not urgent, but there is another matter that needs to be arranged as soon as possible." Priest Chu's heart tightened and he hurriedly said, "Manor Head, please tell me." Zhang Yan said, "I have observed the mountain guarding formation. The formation flags are simple and crude, and the spiritual light is dim. If we encounter a strong enemy, it won't last long. A sect's mountain guarding formation is especially important. If we can't even protect the mountain gate, how can we pass on our skills and teachings?" Priest Chu smiled bitterly and said, "Manor Head, there is no one in our sect who is proficient in formations. There is a formation map in the Celestial City, but the number of spiritual shells needed is in the hundreds of thousands. Our sect does not have that many, so we can only make do with it for now. The mountain guarding formation is best when the spiritual opportunity of the Earth Meridian is compatible. This needs someone who is proficient in formations to set it up. Because it involves the foundation of the sect, it is not suitable to call an outsider. The Hanyuan Cave's foundation is still shallow, and there is no such person. To be able to stand here for more than 200 years without any problems was actually due to Shen Baishuang's influence." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have some experience in the Tao of Prohibition formation. You can choose a few disciples for this matter. I have my own arrangements." Priest Chu was stunned at first, then he was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Manor Head is proficient in formations. This is the fortune of Hanyuan sect." At this moment, a cloud suddenly flew up to the peak and landed. Priest Wen walked out and said loudly, "Senior brother, Manor Head, there is a Jinren outside the door with junior brother Zhao." Priest Chu was surprised and said, "How is junior brother Zhao?" "He has taken the pill and is fine now." Priest Chu said, "Then why don't you call him over to greet the Manor Head?" Priest Wen said yes and immediately left to carry out the order. Not long after, 3 clouds of smoke flew down from the peak. After landing, Zhang Boyan walked out first, bowed to Zhang Yan and retreated to the side. Taoist Wen stepped aside, revealing the last person. It was a short and stout Taoist wearing cloth shoes and a tall hat. This person had a flat face, small eyebrows, and a sparse beard. He didn't look very impressive, but when he saw Zhang Yan, he became slightly uneasy. He bowed and said, "Disciple Zhao Gu of Hanyuan greets the Manor Head." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Junior brother, please rise." He said a few words in a warm and gentle manner, but Zhao Gu was only a yes man. When he asked who the person who attacked him was, he did not give a detailed answer. It was obvious that he was an introverted person and was not good with words. Zhang Yan did not mind. After comforting him, he said, "Junior brother Zhao has just recovered from his injuries. You should not tire yourself. Go back and rest first." Zhao Gu bowed his head to thank him and retreated. Priest Chu sighed and said, "Junior brother Zhao is an honest person. Originally, he should not have gone this time. It's just that junior brother Wen is impulsive and does things rashly. I have to guard the mountain gate, so I had no other choice but to let him go. I didn't think that I would almost harm him." Zhang Yan asked, "How old is this junior brother?" Priest Chu thought for a while and replied, "When junior brother Zhao became my disciple, he was only a child of 10 years old. He should be around 230 years old." Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "I see that this junior brother's aptitude is above junior brother Chu and junior brother Wen. It's just that the skill that he cultivates is not compatible with him, so he was delayed." Taoist Chu found it hard to continue the conversation. Back then, the Xian technique was passed down by Shen Baishuang. Because Zhang Yan's status was different and his cultivation was high, he could say that there was something wrong with it. But as disciples, they could not criticize their teacher behind his back. Zhang Yan did not linger on this topic. He took out a talisman paper from his sleeve and used his finger as a pen to cast a spell in the air. After 10 minutes, he took it down and handed it to Priest Chu and said, "There are 3 skills in this. The 3 junior brothers can take it and cultivate it." As one of the top 10 disciples, he had already seen the most profound 5 Gong and 3 scriptures in Chinsong school, but this skill could not be easily passed down. However, he had read the ancient books in the school in Jingluo Academy and knew quite a few superior skills. He might as well choose a few suitable for the 3 to cultivate and pass them down. Priest Chu immediately guessed that these 3 skills were definitely above the skills that he had previously cultivated. He could not help but be greatly excited and carefully put it away in his bosom. Zhang Yan took a look and said, "Junior brother Chu doesn't have a sleeve bag?" Priest Chu blushed and said, "Junior brother Zhao went to Immortal City to buy spiritual items, so I lent it to him." Zhang Yan turned to Wang Kaiwei and said, "Kaiwei, in a moment, take 3 sleeve bags and send them to the 3 junior brothers' cave abodes." Priest Chu hurriedly thanked him. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "Junior brother Chu, I'll have to trouble you with something. Go to Mount E sect on my behalf and make an appointment with Zhenren Yong another day." When Priest Wen heard this, he stood up excitedly and said, "Senior brother is making an appointment with Yong Fu?" Then he said hatefully, "This time, the one who injured junior brother Zhao must be a disciple of Mount E sect. Mannerhead, do not be courteous with him." Zhang Yan smiled but did not reply. He could see very clearly that the internal affairs of the school were not urgent, but the external crisis of Mount E sect needed to be resolved first. However, from the previous questioning, Mount E sect's methods were actually not fierce. For the past 200 years, the disciples of the 2 sects had never had a direct confrontation. Clearly, there were people who had a bottom line. There was no way they did not know the current situation of Hanyan sect. Even if Zhao Gu brought back some external cultivation items, he would not be able to hold out for a few years. They had waited patiently for more than 200 years, so it was not that they could not afford to wait a few more days. Although Zhao Gu was severely injured, the spirit shell on him was not taken away. This further proved that this was not the doing of Mount E sect. There must be some other reason behind it. Taoist Chu saw that Taoist Wen was extremely excited, shouting non-stop. He took a careful look at Zhang Yan and scolded, "The Manor Master has his own reasons for his arrangements. How is it up to you to interfere? Shut your mouth." Priest Wen was startled. He looked angry but did not dare to say anything. Priest Chu turned around and said, "I will go now. Does the manor head have any other words for me to pass on?" Zhang Yan smiled. "You can tell that fellow Taoist that he can choose the meeting place." Taoist Chu nodded in agreement, then bid farewell and went down the peak. He returned to his cave abode and put the 3 cultivation techniques into the restriction. He turned around and was about to leave when he slapped his forehead and said, "Junior brother Zhao and junior brother Wen both have cultivation techniques. How could I forget to improve junior brother just now? With his talent, if he can enter the manor head's eyes, he will definitely be able to soar to the sky." After thinking for a while, he called a disciple and said, "Go and get your uncle Master Gao. Tell him that I have something to tell him." The disciple left for less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn before he returned and said, "Master, Uncle Master Gao has left the mountain just now. I don't know where he went." Priest Chu frowned and thought to himself, why did he leave the mountain at this time? Chapter 624. Huanghua Hall, Mount Amei Sect. Gao Zhongyuan looked at the golden and wooden pillars, the jade tiles on the floor, the bronze cranes, the pearls on the wall, and the smoke from the purple gold incense burner. He could not help but feel envious. When he first joined Han Yuan, he was just a youth and did not ask for much. He only wanted to embark on the path of Tao and rebuild the sect. But as his cultivation deepened, he gradually became dissatisfied with the sect. All he thought about was how to jump out of the broken gate of Han Yuan's cave. He believed that with his talent, no matter where he went, as long as he could obtain enough cultivation materials, he would one day become a great cultivator. The great elder of Mount Amei sect, Yong Fu, sat on a blue and white throne. He had a scholarly appearance, with a pair of phoenix eyes that were full of spirit. A beautiful beard on his chest fluttered in the wind, from head to toe, be it his clothes, hair, or beard, everything was neatly groomed. He spoke to Gao Zhongyuan, who was below the stairs. "Fellow Taoist Gao, Are you saying that this person is a nascent soul cultivator? Gao Zhongyuan replied, yes. I heard that the person claimed to be martial nephew Shen. Chu Mulan has already handed over the position of sect leader. Yong Fu nodded slowly and said, well, fellow Taoist Chu has given up his position, so this person's identity can't be wrong. I didn't expect Xunren Shun to have a backup plan. He looked at Gao Zhongyuan again and said in a friendly manner, fellow Taoist Gao, thank you for coming here personally. Someone, bring me a plate of jade beads. As soon as he finished speaking, a green-clothed female attendant with a graceful figure walked out with a jade plate in her hand and a smile on her face. But when she reached Gao Zhongyuan, he did not reach out to receive it. Instead, he looked up at Yong Fu and said, this time, Chu Mulan will most likely notice that something is wrong when I go down the mountain. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to return to the sect. I hope Shinren Yong will guide me according to what you said earlier. Please help me. Yong Fu pondered for a while, then nodded and said, although the situation has changed, my previous promise is still valid. However, it is not appropriate for you to stay in the E-Mountain sect. Let's find a famous teacher for you. I am sure you will not be disappointed. He took a brush and wrote a letter in a flash. After which, he tossed it down and said, you have to keep it well. Take this letter and head to the Chu country's Inkheart Stone. When the time comes, there will naturally be someone coming to pick you up. When Gao Zhongyuan heard the 3 words, Inkheart Stone, he immediately relaxed. He cupped his hands and said, thank you for your help, Taoist master. Junior will take his leave now. With that, he turned around and walked out of the hall. Before he left, he didn't forget to roll the jade bead into his sleeve. At this moment, he suddenly felt several disdainful gazes fall on him, but he didn't need to look. He also knew that they were Elder Yang's disciples, but he did not pay attention to them. The E-Mountain sect had been in charge of the Celestial City for 200 years, and the sect was rich and populous. This bit of jade beads was nothing to him, but how could these people know the hardships he had gone through to seek the Tao? He laughed coldly to himself. Even though these people were looking down on him right now, when he became perfected Yuanying, they would not be able to do anything about it. Didn't they still have to bow and scrape to him? The eldest disciple by Jing watched him leave and said in a deep voice, this person deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. Why does master still want to help him? In a Taoist sect, the relationship between master and disciple was the most important. If someone betrayed his master, all the Taoist sects in the world, regardless of good or evil, would not accept him. Yong Fu said plainly, he only got one of Zhenren Shin's incantations, so he isn't really a disciple. It can't be said that he deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. Moreover, he was originally working hard for the sect, but in the end, even the external medicine that was almost in his hands was taken away by the sect for his own use. It's inevitable that he would feel resentful. Don't underestimate this person. If you give him a chance, he might become someone great in the future. As soon as these words were spoken, the 30 or so disciples, including Bai Jing, were unconvinced in their hearts. Yong Fu looked at them, but he smiled and did not say anything more. From his point of view, Gao Zhongyuan was decisive in his actions. When he saw that there was a change in the sect, he immediately broke the door and did not have the slightest bit of reluctance. Such a person was mean, ungrateful, and ambitious. If he did not kill him, he would not feel at ease in the sect. It was better to send him out as soon as possible. At this moment, a disciple entered the hall and reported, Elder, sect leader Chu of the Hanyuan sect is outside, requesting to see you. There was a commotion among the disciples in the hall. Yong Fu was also surprised. His eyes moved as he tried to guess the purpose of Chu Mu's visit. After a while, he said, a guest from afar, please invite sect leader Chu in. Not long after, Chu Mu held a horsetail whisk and strode into the hall with his head held high. When he saw Yong Fu, he bowed and said, Zhenren Yong greets you. Yong Fu got down from his seat and walked to the bottom of the stairs to welcome him. He smiled and returned the greeting. I didn't expect sect leader Chu to come pay a visit. Servants, take a seat. Immediately, 2 maidservants brought a chair and placed it below the stairs. Chu Mu did not stand on ceremony, bowed slightly and sat down. Yong Fu also returned to the hall and sat down. After the maidservants served fragrant tea, he asked, "Sect leader Chu is truly a rare guest. We have been neighbors for more than 300 years, but this is the first time you have come to my hall, right?" Chu Mu replied indifferently, "I am no longer the sect leader of the Hanyuan sect. Zhenren Yong can just call me by my name." Yong Fu pretended to be surprised and asked, "Then who will be taking over the position of sect leader? Will it be fellow Taoist Wen or fellow Taoist Zhao?" Chu Mu replied, "Neither. It will be a senior martial brother of I." Yong Fu seemed surprised and said, "So fellow Taoist Chu has a senior martial brother. This seat is rather uninformed. How should I address this fellow Taoist?" Taoist Chu said bluntly, "My humble sect master is surnamed Zhang and is also a nascent soul cultivator. This humble Taoist has come here today under the sect master's orders to arrange a meeting with Taoist master Yong." Yong Fu's expression turned solemn when he heard that Chu Mu wanted to meet him. He asked in a deep voice, "When and where?" Chu Mu replied, "My sect leader has said that this can be decided by Zhenren Yong." Yong Fu pondered for a moment, then said, "My Mount E sect and your esteemed sect are neighbors. With your esteemed sect leader taking over as sect leader, this seat should pay you a visit and present you with generous gifts. How can my sect be plagued with worldly matters? Moreover, the sect leader is in closed-door cultivation and cannot leave for even a moment. How about this, 2 days from now, at Fish Scale Slope, 100 li away?" Chu Mu secretly cursed. That Fish Scale Slope was actually still within the Mount E sect's sphere of influence. This Yong Fu was really very cautious. Although Zhang Yan had told him that there was no need to worry about the location of the meeting, he still argued, Fish Scale Slope's terrain is not only steep, but it is also a stretch of barren hills and unruly rivers. Wouldn't it be inappropriate for the elders of the two sects to meet there? Yong Fu chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist Chu's words make sense. In that case, let's move another 300 li east and meet at Mount Iron Soldier's Constellation Valley. The scenery there is elegant. Although the outer mountains are covered in frost and snow, the interior of the valley is like spring all year round, with hundreds of flowers vying for beauty. Such a wonderful place, surely it would suit your esteemed sect leader's wishes?" Chu Mu was startled. He did not expect Yong Fu to be waiting for him here. Mount Iron Soldier was adjacent to Su E School. This sect had always had a deep friendship with the Mount E sect, which was extremely beneficial to the other. Although he was still dissatisfied with this arrangement, it was still better than meeting in front of the Mount E sect's gate. As a result, he reluctantly agreed. "Then it's decided." He was also unwilling to stay here for long. After exchanging a few more words with Yong Fu, he stood up and bowed, saying, "Zhenren Yong, sect leader is still waiting for I to return and report. I will take my leave now." Yong Fu smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, why are you in such a hurry?" He pointed to the tea on the table and said, "This is my mountain scripture cleansing tea. Fellow Taoist, are you not going to take a sip before you leave?" Chu Mu said, "No, Zhenren Yong, please stay." After making another Dao salute, he turned around and left the hall with a flick of his sleeves. After he left, a disciple below mocked, "This Chu Mu sure runs fast. Is he afraid that we will detain him?" Someone else replied, "I don't think so. I heard that Madame Chu was also a beauty in the past, but she was abducted by his disciple. I heard that he later took in a concubine whose appearance and figure are both first-rate. Could it be that he is afraid that he will return late and let some junior take advantage of him?" As soon as he said this, a wave of laughter erupted from the crowd. Over the past 200 years, although the disciples of Hanyuan sect had fought with the disciples of Mount Amei sect several times, they had always lost every single time. They had even lost all the territories outside the mountain gate. Therefore, these disciples also looked down on Chu Mu Ran. The first disciple, Bai Jing, was a righteous and prudent person, but when he heard this, he could not help but frown. He shouted, "All of you shut up. How can you all be so presumptuous in front of Master? How can you talk about other people's private affairs behind his back?" How are you a Taoist cultivator? All of you, leave and copy the 3 enclosures Tao scripture 1,000 times as punishment. When the disciples heard this, they immediately lamented, but they had no choice but to obey. After His Highness saluted, each of them frowned and left one by one. Bai Jane came to Yong Fu's side with a serious expression and asked, "Master, are you really going to keep the appointment?" Yong Fu stroked his beard and said, "Since it has been agreed, of course I have to go." Bai Jane worriedly said, "But according to Gao Zhongyuan, Jinren Zhang's cultivation is quite high. Since Jinren Shin ordered him to come here, he must not be someone easy to deal with. Maybe he will even give him some powerful magical weapon. If it was someone else, he would not worry for his master." But Jinren Baishuang was too famous in the past. Back in the Shenwu Mountain, none of the cultivators who dared to fight with him survived. Since this person was so powerful, his martial nephew must not be too far behind. If he fought with Yong Fu, the consequences would be really unpredictable. Yong Fu shook his hand and said, "There is another Yuanying Zhenren in this Shenwu Mountain. It is imperative that I meet this person. Even if I don't meet him today, I will meet him in the future." Bai Jiang was also helpless. Historically, the person in charge of the Shenwu Mountain Celestial City was the person with the highest cultivation level among the dozens of sections. Now that Hanyuan sect had a Yuanying Zhenren, if they wanted to discuss the matter of being in charge of the Celestial City again, Yong Fu could not hide from them. Yong Fu paced a few steps in the hall and suddenly turned around and said, "All these years, I have done things with a lot of leeway. I am not an enemy of Hanyuan sect, so I don't think we will fight to the death every time we meet. But I really do not know what this person's personality is like, so we must be prepared. Jane, take my message and immediately go to Chu country. You must borrow Jinren Fang's magical weapon for me." Bai Jiang solemnly accepted the order and immediately stomped his feet. A smoke rose from the ground and wrapped around his body as he flew out of the hall and headed southeast. Chapter 625. After Priest Chu returned to the mountain, he immediately went to see Zhang Yan and reported what had happened. Zhang Yan praised, "Junior brother Chu has done a good job. May I ask, what is the background of the House of Noble Changes?" Priest Chu said, "The head of the House of Noble Changes, Sun Tong, is also a core transformation cultivator. This person has a close relationship with Yong Fu's disciple, Bai Jing. Are you afraid that they have something up their sleeves? Do you need me to go and investigate first?" Zhang Yan smiled, "No need, I will go with Zhang this time." Priest Chu immediately felt relieved. There were 2 Yuanying cultivators, no one in the mountain could compete with them. Even if they were playing tricks, there was no need to be afraid. However, he did not forget to remind, Jinren Yong has a wide circle of friends and does not lack powerful magic treasures. You need to be careful, master. At this moment, Zhang Boyan let out a cold laugh as if he was very disdainful. Priest Chu looked at him in confusion. Zhang Yan glanced at Zhang Boyan and smiled. "Junior brother Chu is right. I will be careful." Zhang Yan had an appointment tomorrow and might have to fight with Yong Fu again. Priest Chu did not dare to stay any longer. Not long after, he bid farewell and returned to the cave residence with light footsteps. He first took out the cultivation methods that Zhang Yan had given him and sent them to the cave residences of Zhao Gu and Priest Wen. The 2 of them received the cultivation methods and were very happy. Although Priest Chu was also happy, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. After he came out, he made arrangements for the matters that Zhang Yan had previously instructed him to do. He then summoned a disciple and asked, "Has Zhong Yuan returned?" The disciple said, "I have been guarding the mountain gate for a day and did not see Uncle Master Gao return." Taoist Chu frowned and felt that something was amiss. At this moment, a disciple ran over in panic and shouted from afar, "Master, bad news, bad news. I don't know who cut down one of the 3 dark red saplings." What? Taoist Chu's heart skipped a beat. The 3 dark vermilion trees were originally guarded by Gao Zhongyuan. Now that there was a problem and he had disappeared without a trace, it was obvious that Gao Zhongyuan had stolen the dark vermilion trees. He stroked his beard and beckoned the two of them over. You two are not allowed to discuss this matter. If you leak it out, I'll hold you responsible. The two disciples rarely saw Taoist Chu being so strict. They replied with trembling voices, "Disciple obeys." Taoist Chu shook his head and returned to his cave abode. He heard footsteps and a warm and delicate body came up to him. It was a beautiful and enchanting woman. Seeing that his expression wasn't right, she asked with concern, "Master, why do you look so distressed?" "I heard that a new sect leader has arrived. Does he not treat you well?" Taoist Chu shook his head and said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhang's cultivation is high and he treats people kindly. He is someone that Teacher Shen thinks highly of. He's 100 times better than me. It's best to have him as the sect leader, but..." He told her about Gao Zhongyuan and sighed, "I didn't expect this person to be a traitor. I treated him like a nephew. If it wasn't for the difficulty of cutting the dark vermilion trees, I'm afraid I would have taken all of them today. Now that I think about it carefully, this person has been acting strangely for a long time. I didn't notice it. When sect leader's senior martial brother returns tomorrow, I'll ask for his forgiveness." The woman came up and put her hand on his shoulder. She said gently, "Master, don't blame yourself. You've worked hard for the sect for 200 years. It's inevitable that you'll be careless. It's just one less sapling. It's not a big deal." Taoist Chu smiled bitterly, "You don't understand. The dark vermilion trees are not like the others. Even if these three are young, they're worth a lot. With one less, how can the sect leader's cave abode be built?" The woman persuaded, "Since the sect leader is a generous person, he probably won't blame you." Taoist Chu sighed, "Let's hope so." The next morning, under the gaze of the disciples, Zhang Yan and Zhang Boyan rode the strong wind and flew away. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the horizon. These disciples had never seen the power of the Yuanian cultivators. They were all dazzled. Taoist Wen was even more excited. He said, "Headmaster's cultivation is so profound. With Zhenren's help, this trip will be worry-free." On the other side, Zhao Gu kept nodding his head. His eyes were filled with joy. He had obtained the technique yesterday. After cultivating for a night, he realized that it was much better than usual. If he continued to cultivate like this, he would be able to break through the shell and enter the second realm in less than 10 years. Only Taoist Chu seemed to have something on his mind. He forced a smile. Zhang Yan and Zhang Boyan traveled at an incredible speed. In less than half an hour, they arrived in front of the armored soldier mountain. Zhang Yan looked down and saw that amidst the snow-covered mountain range, there was a valley filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers. It was as if a green pearl was embedded there. He was also amazed as he pointed and said, "That must be Constellation Valley." Both of them were experienced cultivators. After circling the valley once and confirming that there were no formations or restrictions, they descended and stood still on a large rock. They were facing the entrance of the valley. Behind them was a stone wall. A small stream flowed under their feet. With a glance, they could see everything in the valley. Not long after, a strong wind flew over and slowly descended. It landed not far away and 3 people walked out. The person in the lead had a cloud of strong wind floating above his head. He had an elegant appearance and a beautiful beard that hung down to his chest. His movements were confident and at ease, as if he wasn't surprised by the appearance of 2 Yuanian cultivators in front of him. He strolled over and cupped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Zhang Yan returned the greeting. "Are you fellow Taoist Yong?" Yong Fu smiled. "That's me. I heard that sect Master Zhang had summoned me, so I came to keep the appointment." Although he appeared to be smiling and talking as usual, he was actually nervous inside. With 2 Yuanian cultivators here, especially Zhang Yan, there were 2 solid and 1 ethereal cloud above his head. It was clear that he was only a step away from entering the second layer of the Yuanian realm. Yong Fu also felt the pressure and could only pretend to be calm. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and pointed with a finger. An item flew out, and with a flash of light, an exquisite pavilion appeared on the ground, complete with cups, tables, and chairs. Zhang Yan extended his hand and said, Sage Master Yong, please. Yong Fu looked unperturbed. He also said, please, and the two of them walked into the pavilion together. After bowing again, they sat down. Yong Fu was the first to speak. I still haven't congratulated fellow Taoist on taking over as the sect master of the Hanyuan sect. He took out a jade box from his sleeve and placed it heavily on the stone table. As a cultivator from the mountains, I didn't prepare any lavish gifts. I only have a box of amber stellar heroes. I hope you won't laugh at me, Sage Zhang. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. You're too kind. Amber stellar heroes were extremely rare, and even for Yuanian cultivators, they were rare items. If it were anyone else, they would have been overjoyed. However, Zhang Yan was an exception. He had Jun Yang's spiritual essence, so he naturally didn't care much for this item. Yong Fu observed his expression and saw that his expression didn't change at all. Whether it was fake or not, it showed that this person wasn't easy to deal with. Zhang Yan didn't talk about other matters. He just drank with him and talked about some interesting anecdotes. Yong Fu also responded frequently. After about 2 hours, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore and asked, "May I know why fellow Taoist Zhang invited me here?" Zhang Yan smiled and put down his wine cup. He said frankly, "Nothing else. I just want to have a duel with fellow Taoist Yong." Yong Fu didn't ask for the reason and only asked, "How do you want to duel?" Zhang Yan said faintly, "I want to have a duel with fellow Taoist. If I win by a fluke, I hope fellow Taoist will give up control of the Celestial City." When he was in the West Sea realm, he didn't have a deep understanding of celestial cities. However, after talking with Chu, Wen, and the others, he realized that it was the lifeline of all sections. The sects in the East Victory continent were as numerous as the stars in the sky. So long as the Celestial City existed, even if the sect was destroyed, so long as the cultivators didn't perish, they could rebuild it in another place. However, once the Celestial City in the land collapsed, the countless sects that depended on it would disperse like the stars in the sky. Without the support of the large sects, it was impossible for them to recover. For example, the Immortal Civ sect originally had a celestial city in the Beima Ocean realm. Since it was occupied by the demon cultivators, it caused all the human cultivator sects in the ocean to be unable to gain a foothold, and they all fled in the end. In the East Victory continent, the strength of a sect was measured by the number of celestial cities. For example, the Darchu country south of the Divine House Mountain was said to possess over 30 celestial cities. The Divine House Mountain had a celestial city as well. When Shen Baishuang was here, he was in charge of it, and after he left, it was taken over by Yong Fu, who had the highest cultivation. Zhang Yan definitely wanted to take control of such an important place. However, the E-Mountain sect was different from the current Hanyuan sect. Not to mention that it had a deep foundation, the restriction formation of the sect was extremely strong, and the Celestial City also had a defensive formation that could not be easily broken through. If they fought head-on, it would be extremely time-consuming and laborious. His goal was to manage the sect well and make it more convenient for him to cultivate. Naturally, he didn't want to cause a bloody storm. If the other party was willing to hand it over through a bet, that would be the best. Yong Fu's heart sank when he heard Chen Shi's objective, and his voice became slightly more unyielding as he said firmly, "If it was any other matter, then so what if I gave it to fellow Taoist? But this is the Immortal City, and it involves the disciples of the sect, so I can't give in at all. I have to compete with fellow Taoist. But what if fellow Taoist loses?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If I lose, the two of us will listen to your sect for 10 years. What do you think?" Yong Fu's eyes lit up. If he could get 2 Yuanian Taoists to work for him for 10 years, what would a celestial city be? He was also decisive and immediately agreed, "All right, then I will accept this agreement. However, the rules of the battle need to be changed." Zhang Yan said, "What does fellow Taoist think?" Yong Fu stretched out 3 fingers and said, "I will fight with fellow Taoist 3 times a day, and the winner of 2 will be the winner." Zhang Yan thought for a while and nodded, "As you wish, fellow Taoist." Yong Fu stared at Zhang Yan and said, In this battle, I will invite fellow Taoists from all over the Divine House Mountain world to observe and bear witness. Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "That is how it should be." Yong Fu said, "Then it's settled." The two of them agreed on a day after the battle and made an oath by high-fiving. After drinking to their heart's content, they went their separate ways. On the way back, the disciple beside Yong Fu couldn't help but ask, "Master, are you confident in defeating that person?" Yong Fu thought for a while and said with a smile, "We haven't fought yet, so how would I know? That person's cultivation is above Master's, and looking at his aura, I think his ability in battle is not bad. However, if your eldest senior brother can borrow that treasure, then he has a great chance of winning." Chapter 626. After the battle between Zhang Yan and Yong Fu, he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stayed in the Constellation Valley to admire the scenery for half a day. Only in the afternoon did he slowly return to the mountain gate. But when he returned with the wind, he saw that Taoist Chu was kneeling alone on the peak for some reason. He was surprised, and after descending he asked, "Junior brother Chu, what is the meaning of this?" Priest Chu lowered his head and said, "I have made a huge mistake. I am here to ask for forgiveness from the manor head." Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" Priest Chu did not dare to hide anything. He told the truth about the dark vermilion seedling being killed and Gao Zhongyuan breaking the door and escaping. In the end, he said, "I have eyes but failed to see. I did not know the right person and caused my disciple to rebel. The treasure was damaged. I hope the manor head will punish me." After he finished speaking, he silently bowed. After listening, Zhang Yan smiled and went forward to help Priest Chu up. He said, "Senior Marshal Brother Chu, quickly get up. How can I blame you for such a small matter?" Priest Chu hesitated for a while and said in a low voice, "To be honest, without this dark vermilion seedling, perhaps the hall can no longer be built." He would not have been so worried if only one dark vermilion seedling was destroyed. However, he had previously promised Zhang Yan to build a few more cave residences in the mountain gate. Even if the 3 seedlings were to be used as compensation, it would barely be enough. Now that one was missing, how could it be done? It was better to come early and ask for forgiveness. Zhang Yan looked at him deeply and said, "There is no need to rush the construction of the cave residences. We will discuss it in detail after I take charge of the immortal abode." The reason why Mount E sect could be so prosperous was because Yong Fu was the immortal abode master. Cultivation was never lacking in external resources. Dozens of sects in the Shenwu Mountain had to serve him as the sect master. After he became the sect master, he could use him to strengthen the sect. Priest Chu said in surprise, "So Manor Head already had a plan." Zhang Yan faintly smiled and said, "Yesterday, I asked you to choose a few disciples. Have you found a suitable candidate?" Priest Chu hurriedly replied, "How can I not take Manor Head's instructions to heart? After careful selection yesterday, I've selected a total of 7 disciples." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Wait for them to come see me." After that, he stepped into the cave residence. Priest Chu looked at Zhang Yan's departing back in a daze. He could not fathom the manor lord's thoughts at all. Thinking back to the situation just now, it seemed like the other party didn't blame him. He felt a little relieved and stomped his feet. He flew down the peak. He didn't dare to delay Zhang Yan's matter. Halfway up the mountain, he immediately gathered the 7 disciples and summoned another cloud of smoke, wrapping these people up the peak together. At Zhang Yan's current residence, it was the top of Tsangzhu Peak. It was surrounded by cliffs that were covered by ice and snow all year round. There were no rattan ropes to climb up and down. If the disciples didn't have flying techniques, they would definitely not be able to go up and down. The few flying boats in the Hanyuan sect had long been exchanged for spirit shells, so Priest Chu could only do it himself. When they reached the entrance of the cave, Wang Kaiwei came out and said, "Master invites Uncle Master Chu inside to talk." After experiencing the incident just now, Priest Chu always felt that he did something inappropriate. He subconsciously wanted to avoid Zhang Yan, so he said, "I won't go in." He turned serious and said to the 7 disciples, "Remember, whatever the Manor Lord wants you to do, you have to follow his orders. If you disobey, you won't be let off easily when you return." The 7 disciples hurriedly agreed and then entered the cave. In less than 30 steps, they reached the inner room. The walls of the cave were already hung with jade beads, illuminating the place like it was daytime. An incense burner was placed in the middle, emitting a calming fragrance. Zhang Yan was sitting on the jade couch. Everyone's expression turned cold and hurriedly came up to greet him. Zhang Yan looked down and swept his gaze across the faces of the disciples. The 7 of them hurriedly lowered their heads. As they didn't know why the new Manor Lord chose them to come here, their hearts were slightly perturbed. After looking at them, Zhang Yan said, "The talents of the 7 of you can only be ranked low among the many disciples. It's impossible for you to live forever in this life. I have a technique here. Although it can't increase your lifespan, if you practice it well, the benefits will be endless. Are you willing to learn it?" The 7 of them were well aware of their own situation. They had all cultivated for 70 to 80 years, but since opening their meridians, there had been no progress. Unless they had a great opportunity, no matter how much they cultivated, it would be a waste of effort. One of the disciples dressed in blue stood up and said loudly, "Disciple is willing to learn." With him taking the lead, the other 6 people also voiced their agreement. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and a total of 7 talismans were sent down. In these talismans, there is a method to deduce the erosion runes. The 5 of you, take it and study it. Come back to me in 3 days. Although the 7 of them didn't know what the erosion runes were, they knew that their own opportunity had come. They just had to see if they could grasp it. They suppressed their excitement and bowed to Zhang Yan. Then, they all left the cave abode and returned to their own residences to study the mysteries within. Cultivators didn't know the passage of time. In the blink of an eye, it had passed. On the 3rd day, the group was sent back to the cave abode by Taoist Chu. Zhang Yan asked, "Did you understand the technique I taught you that day?" The disciple dressed in blue from before stood up and said, "The technique that the Manor Lord taught me is very profound. I dare not say that I understand it, but I have a slight understanding of it." Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and pointed. An erosion rune appeared on the ground. He said, "Decipher the true meaning contained in it for me to see." The disciple dressed in blue was a little nervous, but he quickly calmed down. He took out the bamboo chips and slowly deduced. After a full 15 minutes, he finally stopped. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and took out a piece of paper. He wrote down the true meaning he had deduced and handed it over respectfully. Wang Kaiwei took a step forward and took it. Zhang Yan took it and glanced at it, but he didn't say anything. He put it aside and said to the other 6 disciples, "Don't just stand there. Come and help me decipher this word." When the 6 disciples saw the rune, they also tried to deduce it in their hearts. However, they didn't have any bamboo chips. Most of them only managed to deduce it for a while and felt that it was difficult to continue. Only a petite and beautiful female disciple had already deciphered it. After Zhang Yan gave the order, she only took a short while to present the text she had written. After reading it, Zhang Yan made a decision in his heart. He pointed out the 5 people who were still thinking hard and gave them a jade talisman. He said lightly, "The 5 of you take this and go. When you have studied it thoroughly, come and find me." The 5 people were disappointed. However, after listening to Zhang Yan's words, it seemed that there was still a glimmer of hope. They reluctantly pulled themselves together and left with complicated thoughts. There were only 2 people left in the hall. Zhang Yan's expression softened a bit and he said, "From today onwards, I will teach you the way of restrictions." When the 2 people heard that he was going to teach them the way of restrictions, they were overjoyed. Those who were good at restrictions in the Dongsheng continent all lived in celestial cities. Their status was so high that even some elders in sects couldn't compare. Even if they couldn't live forever, they could live a carefree life for hundreds of years. However, they had misunderstood. Although Zhang Yan was going to teach them the way of restrictions, he wouldn't let them take a step out of the sect. The sects in the Dongsheng continent were too dependent on the celestial cities. The rise and fall of a city could determine the life and death of the sects in the inner realm. He didn't want the Hanyuan mansion to be the same. Within 1,000 years, there would be 3 major tribulations. Although the first of the devil's tribulations was only in the Donghua continent for now, the subsequent 2 tribulations would affect the 9 continents in the world. Apart from those powerful cultivators, no one in the world would be able to avoid them. Under such circumstances, he wouldn't allow the foundation of a sect to be in the hands of others. He had to find a way to change it. To do this, he needed to set up the Jade Elixir Essence Pool, the Earth Emanation Spirit Vein, and other things that were essential for cultivation. He also needed to train people who were good at alchemy and formations. That way, even if the sect was sealed, the disciples could still cultivate and wouldn't be cut off. However, this wasn't something that could be done overnight. It had to be done step by step. Right now, he was going to start with formations. He planned to use 100 or 200 years to get rid of the dependence on the celestial cities. He gave them a scroll of Taoist book that he had already written and said, "Take this book. The 2 of you need to study it well. When I have time, I will come and test you." The 2 of them respectfully received it, knelt down, kowtowed, and left. Wang Keting saw that although Zhang Yan had taught them the Dharma, he didn't even ask for the names of the 2 disciples. She knew that he wasn't very satisfied with them. She looked around and said, "Master, do you want Keting to find some talented disciples for you?" Zhang Yan smiled and looked at her. This disciple of his was really smart. These few people really didn't suit his taste. However, in the current Deep Abyss sect, he couldn't find anyone more suitable, so he could only make do with them. He wasn't going to give up on the 5 people who left just now. He wanted to teach them other alchemy techniques. He thought for a while and said, "In a few days, I will send the 2 of you out to travel and look for external medicine. Since Keting is willing to share Master's burden, then do it well. Don't disappoint me." When Wang Keting heard that her master was willing to let her go out to travel, she was overjoyed and almost cheered. She bowed and said, "Yes, Master." Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "I will have to wave my hand and order the 2 of them to leave in a few days." After the 2 of them left the cave, he stretched out his hand and used his mana to set up a layer of restriction at the door. Then he sat on the bed. The battle with Yonghe would be in a month's time. Even though his opponent's cultivation was lower than his, he didn't underestimate any of his opponents. Especially when he spoke to Yonghe that day, he vaguely felt that this person seemed to be inextricably linked to Chu's Zhongtai faction, so he couldn't be careless. Right now, he still needed a period of polishing before he could reach the 2nd level of the nascent soul realm. In a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to increase his cultivation. Therefore, he planned to take advantage of this period of time to learn the technique that the sect leader taught him. After he calmed his mind for a moment, a thought arose in his mind, and row after row of profound techniques written in eroded markings floated up into his mind. Earlier, he'd already guessed the origins of this divine ability, and at this moment, he was able to comprehend it after a slight deduction. He couldn't help but smile, and then he used his finger as a brush to write 5 large words on the stone table in front of him. Chapter 627. P.S. The 2nd update is a little late. There's still one more update because I have to wake up early tomorrow and sleep early. I won't be able to make it in the evening. I'll make it up around noon tomorrow. The Violet Sky Divine Lightning was ranked 2nd amongst the 12 divine abilities of Qinsong School, and it was only inferior to the Great Coiling Dragon Lightning Seal. However, when Zhang Yan fought with others earlier, he noticed that the might of this divine ability wasn't very formidable. At least, it was still inferior when compared to divine abilities like the sonorous sound of 9 mountains and Triang Qi. Although this technique seemed to have some skill in restraining evil demons, compared to its great reputation, it did not seem to live up to its name. Previously, when he used this technique, he mostly relied on his profound mana that was a level higher than others to condense tens or even hundreds of bolts of divine lightning to strike down at the same time. In this way, most of the people facing him would have to temporarily avoid the brunt of the attack. However, if it was someone else who used it, then it would be a waste of mana. At that time, he felt that this supernatural power would not be so simple and that there must be something that he did not understand. It was only when he received this spell from the sect leader that he was able to verify his thoughts. What he had practiced before was just a glimpse of the basics of this divine ability. Only by learning how to use it would he be considered to have truly learned it. The Purple Heaven Divine Thunder Net could spread out lightning and weave a net of electricity. Once a cultivator was trapped in it, it could be refined by the power of lightning. Zhang Yan let out a sigh. If he could learn this mystique during the sword competition assembly, then he would have another way to counter Feng Hai. However, when he thought about it carefully, if he hadn't made a great contribution to the sect, he wouldn't have been able to obtain this technique. Furthermore, this technique was extremely powerful. If he wanted to reach the point where he could control it as he pleased, he would have to cultivate diligently. Who knew how many years it would take? He shook his head and tossed aside all the distracting thoughts in his mind. He calmed his mind and slowly circulated his qi according to the method. At the Thousand Cave Cliff, the back mountain of the Emshan sect, Yong Fu sat on the altar and asked, "Disciple, have you sent the letters from the sects?" Bai Jiang replied, "Among the 38 sects and aristocratic families, other than Longxiang School and Shi family, because their leaders are not in their schools, the rest of the 38 sects and aristocratic families are not in the school." He was not an outsider. The rest of the sect leaders have personally promised to come and be witnesses on the day of the battle. Yong Fu sighed and said, "I also know that the Shi clan leader went to Chu last month. Thinking back to the day of the duel, it could turn around. As for the Longxiang sect," he paused and continued, "Let them be." Bai Jiang nodded his head in agreement. The E-Mountain sect had been in charge of the Immortal City for more than 200 years. Because Yong Fu's methods were brilliant, the rules he set were not too strict, so all the sects on the Divine House Mountain obeyed him. Only the Longxiang sect was different. This sect had only arrived here 100 years ago and seemed to have some background. Yong Fu had repeatedly warned them not to offend them, and later on, he had found the opportunity to ask a few times, but Yong Fu had always kept it a secret. Yong Fu seemed to be in a very good mood at the moment. He said, "In about half a month's time, I will be able to refine the Dharma treasure according to my will. During the time I am not here, I will leave it to you, my disciple, to arrange the matters of the duels. If any of the sect masters come, you must not neglect them and treat them well." Bai Jiang said, "Master, don't worry, I know what I am doing." Yong Fu nodded his head. He looked at the sky and said, "The time is almost here, you should leave first, in case I hurt you when I refine the purple calamity fruit." Bai Jing bowed his body and left the cave. Yong Fu sat for a while and used his mana to seal the cave door. Then he took out a jade-green bead and tossed it into the sky. He opened his mouth and spat out a breath of inner breath to support it. The astral cloud above him also spun continuously, releasing bolts of astral lightning that crackled and bombarded the jade bead. Along with the passage of time, the color of the pearl changed from jade to red. First, a wave of ghastly cold air filled the interior of the cavern, and then it was instantly tainted with a layer of frost before emitting a wave of scorching heat. Even the water within the cup was instantly evaporated. After 9 consecutive times, the restrictions within the cavern were unable to endure it any longer, and they ceaselessly emitted cracking sounds. If this were to continue, then even the cavern would probably collapse. Yong Fu hurriedly stopped what he was doing and walked out of the cave door. He walked into another cave on the left and took out the bead again. He did the same thing as before, but once the restriction showed signs of collapsing, he would have to change to another cave. After refining for more than 20 days, Yong Fu had changed more than 30 caves. At this time, the bead in front of him was only the size of a grain of rice. He felt that it was about time, so he retracted his Xian Qi and slowly sucked the bead into his stomach. After 3/4 of an hour, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, then stood up and muttered to himself, "I finally succeeded." With this fire and water calamity power, even if that Taoist Zhang is really at the second stage, I can still fight against him. He recuperated for a while, then removed the restriction in front of the door. Just as he was about to walk out of the cave, a clear sound came from outside. He listened carefully and said loudly, "Which old friend is here?" Just as he finished speaking, a loud laugh was heard, and a tall figure strode in. This person wore a green short-sleeved shirt, carrying a bamboo basket on his back. His hair was messy, as if he had not combed it for a long time. When he saw Yong Fu, he brushed the hair in front of his forehead with both hands and smiled. "Brother Yong, I was passing by and specially asked for a cup of water and wine. I didn't expect to wait for 10 days. Yong Fu was surprised. "So it's Brother Jiang. Why you here? Please come in and have a seat." The person did not stand on ceremony and sat inside. "A few days ago, I was ordered by the sixth prince to capture the demon king and crocodile who stole the secret map. I chased him all the way to the Beima Sea boundary. Although I am more skilled on land, I could only watch him enter the sea. I remembered that the Mount E sect is nearby, so I wanted to invite Brother Yong to come with me and see if we can capture this demon together." Yong Fu sighed slightly and said apologetically, "Brother Jiang, you came at a bad time. I have to fight someone in half a month, so I can't leave. After this matter is over, I will go with Brother Jiang." The Taoist surnamed Jiang was puzzled, then he pondered and suddenly realized, "Is there another Yuanying in the Shenwu mountain?" Yong Fu shook his head, "Not really, but Zhenren Shun's apprentice nephew has returned." The Taoist surnamed Zhang's expression changed slightly. "Is it Zhenren Shun from the Hanyuan sect?" Yong Fu said, "Yes, Zhenren Shun's apprentice nephew has just returned and wants to fight with me to decide the ownership of Celestial City." The Taoist surnamed Jiang asked, "Are you confident?" Yong Fu said confidently, "If it was 10 days ago, I wouldn't dare to say so. But Taoist Zhang is confident in his skills and gave me time to prepare. Now that I have consumed the purple calamity fruit and borrowed a defensive magical treasure from Taoist Fong, I have a good chance of winning." Purple calamity fruit? The Taoist surnamed Jiang looked at Yong Fu in shock. "Brother Yong, you are really generous. You are even willing to use such a treasure? Just this one fruit is worth half of the Celestial City, right?" Yong Fu gently stroked his beard and smiled. "Treasures are meant to be used, otherwise they are worthless. That day, I did everything I could to find this item to deal with a strong enemy. Moreover, as long as I can protect the position of Celestial City's ruler, I might be able to find a better treasure after some time." The Taoist surnamed Jiang laughed out loud. "Interesting, interesting. This time, as an unrelated person, I want to stay and see what kind of person is able to force Brother Yong to take out all of his assets. Mount Iron Soldier, Constellation Valley. Because the location of the battle between Zhang Yan and Yong Fu was set here, as the date of the battle grew closer and closer, the valley had become extraordinarily clamorous. Rainbows shot about in the sky while shadows flashed about, and a streak of light flashed by from time to time. It was the sect masters of the various sects on Divine House Mountain that were rushing over here. The head of the house of Benyi, Sun Tong, was full of smiles as he personally stood in the valley to welcome the guests. His third grandson, Xiuqing, was very displeased and said, "Father, you are also a head of a sect. Why do you need to please these people?" Sun Tong scolded, "Shut up. My house of Benyi only has a dozen or so disciples. If we don't make friends with fellow Taoists, how can we establish ourselves in Mount Divine House?" Sun Xiuqing muttered, "What kind of logic is Taoist Yong fighting on the territory of my sect? Taoist Yong wins, then it's fine, but if he loses, then that Taoist Zhang might take action against my Wu family." Sun Tong was furious. "Shut up. What do you know? Taoist Yong's arts are profound, and there are many treasures in the Celestial City. How can he lose? This is a rare opportunity for my house of Benyi. Don't talk nonsense. If the people of Mount Amei hear you, even I won't be able to protect you." Sun Xiuqing curled his lips and said, "Didn't father say that you are on good terms with Bai Jane? You can't even protect your son. I don't think this relationship is reliable. My house of Benyi should disband as soon as possible." To outsiders, Sun Tong and Bai Jane were on good terms, but in reality, that was not the case. He had just shamelessly tried to curry favor with Bai Jane, even thinking of giving his daughter to Bai Jiaying as a Dao companion. Even so, Bai Jiaying didn't pay much attention to him. Now that his son had poked at him, he couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. He scolded, "You unfilial son! Scram! Don't let me see you again. If you want to leave, then leave. Don't come looking for me to return." Sun Xiuqing wasn't afraid of his father at all. He stretched his body, and a beam of profound light soared up into the sky. When he was in midair, his eyeballs turned around a few times, and he looked at a tall mountain in the north. He activated his transcendence energy and flew over there. An hour later, he arrived at the mountain gate of the Deep Cave sect. He cupped his hands at the disciple guarding the gate and said, "Fellow Taoist, please go in and report to Uncle Master Chu that the disciples of the House of Benyi are here on the orders of the sect master." When the disciple heard this, he didn't dare to delay and immediately went in to report. In less than half an incense stick's time, Priest Chu flew out on a cloud of smoke. Sun Xiuqing smiled and said, "Uncle Master Chu, long time no see, your cultivation has become more refined." Priest Chu had seen Sun Xiuqing a few times, so he said politely, "So it's Nephew Sunday. What brings you here today?" Sun Xiuqing chuckled and cupped his hands. "Uncle Master Chu, may I be so bold to ask, ever since Spiritual Master Zhang became the house master of the Deep Cave sect, have any of the 37 sects come to visit Spiritual Master Zhang?" Priest Chu was startled. He frowned and said, "Why do you ask?" Sun Xiuqing's expression turned serious. He solemnly cupped his hands and said, "I came here today to say that the Benyi school is willing to accept the Deep Cave sect as the sect master." Chapter 628. P.S. This is yesterday's update, there will be more tonight. On the 3rd day of the 10th month, it was the appointed date for the duel between Mount Amei Pai and Hanyuan School. Within the constellation Star Valley, within a month, dozens of tall and spacious buildings had been built one after another. Terraces, waterside pavilions, mountain pavilions, and winding bridges could be seen everywhere. More than 100 servants and maids, dressed in colorful clothes and holding pots and cups, shuttled back and forth between the flowing water and the rainbow corridors. Inside the building, people were singing and dancing, and the sound of stringed instruments could be heard. In the valley, there was a pond that was a few acres large, and half of it was covered with lotus leaves. On top of a lotus flower that was condensed from green smoke, there was a young girl in green clothes. Her skin was like a lotus, her lips were a little rouge, and her toes that were like white jade lightly touched the tip of the lotus flower. She danced there lightly and gracefully, and her movements were delicate and beautiful. She could be said to be peerlessly beautiful. However, the sect leaders sitting in the pavilions were not in the mood to enjoy the music and watch the dance. They were gathered together to discuss the battle. Someone asked, "Everyone, who do you think will win today's battle?" An elder from an aristocratic family stroked his beard and said, "That Taoist Master Zhang is an outsider with a shallow foundation. How could he have a foothold in Mount Shenwu? This old man thinks highly of Master Yong." Someone else said, "That's hard to say. The school of Hanyuan has been in our Shenwu mountain for 300 years. When Jinren Shen was still around, he was in charge of the celestial city. If this senior can do it, how do you know that Jinren Zhang can't?" The elder from before suddenly laughed and said, "Dao brother must be joking. If he really is someone like Jinren Shen, Jinren Yong would have long given up the celestial city upon seeing him. Would there still be a need to fight?" Su Yi School's sect master Sun Tong stood up and spread his arms. "Everyone, everyone. Hearing this one's words, Elder Ren is correct. Venerable Yong's cultivation is profound and his magical power is boundless. He often plans before taking action. If he didn't have a chance of victory, why would he be so ostentatious? This one believes that Venerable Yong's victory is already within his grasp in this battle of magical powers." Sun Tong was originally in high spirits. But as soon as he finished speaking, after waiting for a while, he realized that no one responded, so he laughed dryly and sat down awkwardly. He cursed inwardly, "In vain I spent so much effort to greet you. But he didn't even give him this little bit of face. How hateful! Su Yimen was just a small sect with a dozen or so people, plus Sun Tong was born as a woodcutter in the mountains. Nobody looked up to him. Therefore, his words did not carry much weight at all. Moreover, his words were suspected of flattery. Going up to him would be degrading their own status, so they ignored him. As they were talking, celestial music suddenly sounded in the sky. Looking up, they saw a cloud floating in the sky, carrying a large ship. 4 core formation cultivators wearing yellow robes were leading the way, and behind the ship were more than 30 mystic light realm cultivators in elegant clothes. The great elder of Mount E sect, Yong Fu, was sitting on the roof of the pavilion. Daoren, whose face was covered by his hair and beard, was sitting next to him. The two of them were talking and laughing. Around them, there were a dozen boys who were serving them with instruments in their hands. When the sect masters of the various sects saw this, their expressions changed. They didn't think that Mount E sect actually had 2 Yuanying enlightened masters. When a cultivator reached a higher realm, the people they befriended were mostly people with similar cultivation levels. Yong Fu was only one person, but the cultivators of Mount Shenwu knew that he had a wide circle of friends. As long as he paid the price, he would be able to find many people to help him. This was a great deterrent to the sects in the mountain boundary. On the other hand, after Zhang Yan arrived, some people had the thought of joining him. However, when they remembered that he was a cultivator from the outer seas, maybe one of them would leave like Shen Baishuang, so they gave up on the thought. The sect masters all went up to greet Yong Fu. After some small talk, the people of Mount E sect landed on the main seats in the north. Just as they sat down, someone said, "Hanyuan sect is also here." Everyone turned to look and saw a cloud raft flying over from the northwest. Zhang Yan was wearing a black robe and sitting in the center. The Wang sisters stood behind him. Zhang Boyan stood on his left, a step behind him. Behind him were the 3 core formation cultivators, Chu Mu Ran, Daoist Wen, and Zhao Gu. Behind them were 7 or 8 cultivators led by 2 mystic light realm disciples. This time, they had brought more than half of the sect's strength. Someone exclaimed, "Is that enlightened Master Zhang?" The Taoist beside him seems to be a Yuanying enlightened master no matter how I look at it. When everyone saw the arrival of 2 Yuanying cultivators, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Mount Shenwu was originally a place in the north of the Dongxing continent. It had always been remote, but this time, 4 Yuanying enlightened masters had appeared. How could they not be shocked? Yong Fu's gaze swept over Zhang Boyan a few times, and he was secretly shocked. He originally wanted to borrow Taoist Zhang's power to suppress Zhang Yan, but he didn't think that this opponent was not simple as well. There was actually a Yuanying enlightened master accompanying him. At this moment, Sun Tong, the head of Su Yi School, was trembling all over. He saw his son, Sun Xiuqing, standing among the Hanyuan sect disciples. When Sun Tong saw Sun Tong looking over and winking at him, Sun Tong was so angry that his vision turned black. If Mount E sect found out about this, then Su Yi School would not be able to escape responsibility no matter what. When Yong Fu saw that the cloud raft was close in the blink of an eye, he sat up, stepped on the astral wind, and took the initiative to go forward. Zhang Yan also got off the cloud raft and floated forward. Not long after, the two of them met on the field. After greeting each other, they first chatted for a while, then they got to the main topic. Yong Fu said, "Taoist Zhang, earlier I said that I would fight 3 rounds with you. However, you and I are the heads of the same sect, and it is not easy for us to cultivate to this stage. It would be beneath our dignity to fight barehanded, so why don't we change the method?" Zhang Yan said, "Then what does Taoist Zhang think?" Yong Fu stroked his beard as if thinking for a while, then said, "How about this? You and I each choose a core formation disciple from our sect and bestow him with a magic treasure. We will fight each other with Taoist techniques, and whoever can last the longest will be the winner. What do you think, Taoist Zhang?" Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. Yong Fu had put in a lot of thought. As spiritual master Yuanying, he had to kill a core formation disciple in front of all the heads of the Shenwu mountain. This was a test of propriety, and in this way, it would greatly weaken his advantage in cultivation. However, he did not care, and said with a smile, "The guest follows the host, we will do as Taoist Zhang says." Yong Fu bowed and returned to the building. After a while, his eldest disciple, Bai Jing, came out on a cloud of smoke and came in front of Zhang Yan. He bowed and said, "I am Bai Jing, greet spiritual master Zhang. I hope senior will show mercy later." Zhang Yan looked at him and saw smoke coming out of Bai Jing's mouth and nose. Obviously, he was trying to condense magic power and true seal. He should be a second-tier core formation cultivator, one level higher than Taoist Chu. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "What magic treasure do you have? Take it out first." Bai Jing bowed again and then retreated a few hundred feet. When he was far away, he waved his hand and threw out a 5-story golden pavilion that was shining with countless rays of light. After it spun in the air, it fell down and firmly protected his body. The people below exclaimed, "The Golden Palace Barrier?" Someone else said, "So this is where spiritual Master Yong's confidence comes from." With this magic treasure, spiritual Master Zhang will be in trouble. This Golden Palace Barrier was a treasure borrowed from spiritual Master Fong, a good friend of spiritual Master Fong. It was a profound level weapon. When a cultivator hid inside it, it was like hiding inside a formation and was extremely difficult to break. Zhang Yan thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. He formed a sign with his hand and immediately gathered a drop of Xianming heavy water. Then he gathered his spiritual power on it. After a while, he flicked his finger, and a drop of black water without any smoke or fire flew out. In an instant, it smashed on the treasure shield. Bai Jing saw that the water droplet was inconspicuous. He originally thought that Zhang Yan had only come up to test the water droplet and hadn't really made a move. Who would have thought that as soon as he collided with it, he suddenly heard a loud bang that shook his head to the point of dizziness, and when he looked again, he was dumbstruck. The Golden Palace treasure barrier had already transformed into a golden light and disappeared into the sky. Yong Fu was shocked. This situation clearly showed that after the magic treasure was damaged, it took the initiative to return to its owner's hand. What kind of method was this to be able to damage a profound level weapon on the spot? Even if this treasure was only wielded by a core formation cultivator, it shouldn't have been defeated so quickly. Bai Jing stood there, not knowing what to do. After a while, he regained his wits and hurriedly returned to Yong Fu's side. He knelt down and said, "This disciple is incompetent. Honored master, please punish me." Yong Fu sighed softly and said, "It's not your fault. Master underestimated my opponent." Since Bai Jing was defeated, it was the turn of the Deep Abyss School's disciples. Because there were no core formation cultivators among the younger generation, only one of Chu, Wen, or Zhao could be chosen. After some discussion, Taoist Chu walked out and stood in front of spiritual Master Yong. He said, "Please enlighten me, spiritual Master Yong." Yong Fu thought for a while and suddenly said, "There's no need to fight this round. This seat admits defeat." He was very clear that Chu Mu had a protective magic treasure bestowed by Shen Baishuang. He felt that if he didn't go all out, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Chu Mu as quickly as Zhang Yan. In that case, it would be better to hold back and save his trump card for later. Zhang Yan raised his brows. This Yong Fu was quite decisive. He smiled and asked, "Spiritual Master Yong, how will the second round be conducted?" With a wave of Yong Fu's sleeve, 4 strong men walked out carrying 2 blocks of ice the size of millstones. The ice was as translucent as glass, pure and clear, showing no signs of melting under the scorching sun. What was even more strange was that sealed inside each block of ice was a fist-sized, sinister-looking insect with thorny hairs on its abdomen and back and armor-like limbs. He pointed and said, "This object is known as the frozen monolith stone embryo, unique to my Shenwu mountain. It was originally formed from the condensation of a nephrite bamboo shoot and the saliva of a divine bird, then buried under the cold ice for thousands of years. The strange insect inside is a pair of 1,000-year-old scorpion spiders. The second round will be on this creature." You and fellow Taoist will each use your transcendence energy to refine the ice plate without harming the scorpion spider in the slightest. Whoever releases the poisonous insect first and subdues it will be the winner of this round. The heads of the various sects below paled. The 1,000-year-old scorpion spiders were extremely ferocious. At their peak, they were poisonous insects that could fight a third-layer Yuanine cultivator. Although they had been sealed in ice for countless years and their strength must have been greatly reduced, they were still difficult to deal with once released. Moreover, there were two of them here. It was unknown whether Yong Fu and Zhang Yan could suppress them. Zhang Yan's expression changed when he heard the scorpion spider's name. He glanced at the ice plate and suddenly smiled, saying, "Fellow Taoist Yong, if you can give these 2 frozen monolith stone embryos to I'll consider it my loss." Chapter 629. Yong Fu was taken aback. A few thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried to guess what Zhang Yan's intentions were. Was the other party asking for this item because he didn't want to fight him or because the item had other uses? Yong Fu couldn't figure it out. But in his heart, he felt that he could make use of this to his advantage. Thinking up to this point, he waved his hand and smiled. "I can give this pair of icebound stone embryos to you, but I have a condition." Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. "Please speak, fellow Taoist." Yong Fu said, "In the next match, even if it ends in a draw, it will be counted as my Mount Amei Sect's victory." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and nodded. "This is a reasonable suggestion. I agree." Hearing this, Yong Fu already knew that the other party was most likely here for the icebound stone embryos and not because he was afraid of fighting. However, the icebound stone embryos weren't anything rare in Mount Shenwu. The only difference was the insects, birds, and beasts that were sealed within them. For the other party to give up on a match for this item, could it be for the 2,000-year-old scorpion spiders? However, once these poisonous insects died, their vitality would leak out, leaving behind only a worthless body. He had never heard of any uses for them. Yong Fu secretly made up his mind. If he had the chance, he would definitely figure out the reason behind this. Snapping out of his thoughts, he glanced at Zhang Boyan and said to Zhang Yan, "I've met that fellow Taoist in the valley before. May I know how I should address him?" Zhang Yan said, "That's my residence's guest elder, Zhenren." Yong Fu smiled. "What a coincidence. The one behind me, enlightened Master Jiang, is also a guest elder of my Mount Amei sect." Zhang Yan understood what he meant and smiled. "Enlightened Master Yong, do you want these two to fight in the next match?" Yong Fu laughed and nodded. Enlightened Master Zhang's guess is correct. However, this is too boring. Why don't we set another rule? If the two of them are in danger, you and I can each lend a hand 3 times to prevent the match from being dragged out for too long. It would be within this Constellation Valley. The time limit is 2 hours. Whoever wins will be the winner. What does fellow Taoist think? Zhang Yan knew that the other party must have already discussed this idea. It was definitely not something the other party came up with on the spur of the moment, especially when Cuckoo was there to save him from danger. This added countless variables to the battle. When cultivators fought, even if it was a Dharma treasure or a Taoist technique, as long as he used it at the crucial moment, he might be able to turn the tide of the battle. However, he was well aware of Zhang Boyan's abilities and was extremely confident in him. Thus, he only needed to think for a moment before agreeing. Yong Fu bowed to him and left. Zhang Yan turned his head and said to Zhang Boyan, "This time, I'll have to trouble Zhang to go up and fight." Zhang Boyan laughed eerily and said, "Ever since the sword duel, I haven't fought with anyone in a long time. I didn't expect someone to come knocking on my door." Yong Fu returned to the back and whispered a few words to the Taoist surnamed Jiang. The latter nodded and flew out with the wind. He said loudly, "I am Jiang Ziqing. I've come to experience Zhang Zhang's brilliance." Zhang Boyan let out a cold shout and also leaped into the air. He stopped in front of the Taoist surnamed Jiang. The two of them bowed to each other and retreated far away. When Zhang Boyan saw that the distance between the two of them was about 300 feet, He shook his body and black smoke gushed out from his 7 orifices. In an instant, the surrounding several li became filled with cold wind and the sky became dark and gloomy. The Taoist surnamed Zhang's heart trembled. He thought to himself, could this person be a disciple of the heretical sects? It won't be easy to get close to him. The cultivation sects of the Dongsheng continent were divided into the heretical sections. The heretical sects had strange methods and often didn't act according to common sense. Before he could see through the opponent's methods, he didn't want to rashly take on the attack out of caution and retreated a little further. Zhang Boyan took advantage of the fact that the demonic smoke blocked his opponent's vision. He raised his hand and pointed. With a crack, a bolt of Yin lightning fell from above. The Taoist surnamed Zhang's reaction was also extremely fast. The protective treasure on his body flashed and blocked the lightning qi. However, his body also paused because of this. Zhang Boyan immediately took advantage of this opportunity. He raised one hand and made a hand sign. The strong cloud above his head shook. The cold crystal white bone sword, the yin-yang bracelet, the stifling breath nail and the dove's face tablet all flew out in one go. At the same time, his other hand struck down unceasingly with yin thunder, entangling the opponent on the same spot. The Taoist surnamed Jiang originally wanted to defend and then find an opportunity to counterattack. However, when he saw this scene, his expression changed. He hurriedly threw out an ingot from his sleeve and set up a golden auspicious light to protect his entire body. However, there were 4 magic treasures on the opposite side, so this kind of defense was slightly weak. The light was shattered into pieces with a bang, and even the protective treasure light collapsed together. He couldn't help but feel suffocated. However, this action delayed the 4 treasures for a moment. At this critical moment, he suddenly took a deep breath and pulled his body up. He immediately turned into a long rainbow and flew away. His speed was as fast as lightning. Zhang Boyan sneered. His shoulders shook slightly and his body suddenly turned into a rolling yellow smoke. He soared into the sky and chased after him. Zhang Yan looked at the Taoist surnamed Zhang's actions and raised his eyebrows. Only now did he know why Yong Fu said a draw would be a win. So he was waiting here. In a battle between 2 Yuanying cultivators, if one side was skilled in the art of escape, then he could advance and retreat at will. Even if he didn't fight with his opponent, he could still maintain a stalemate. The Taoist surnamed Jiang was a person who was skilled in escape. If Zhang Boyan couldn't catch up, then even if the 2 of them didn't fight from the beginning to the end of the 3rd round, the E-Mountain sect would still win. At this time, Yong Fu saw the 2 of them fly into the sky. He waved his sleeve and threw out a shuttle boat. He then stepped on it and conjured a spell with his hand. With a loud sound, he broke through the sky and chased after them. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. He stood in the same place without moving. Taoist Chu couldn't help but feel anxious. He said, "Why didn't the chief help Zhenren?" Beside him, Taoist Wen pondered and said, "I'm afraid that senior brother Zhang's escape technique is not as good as those 2. He won't be able to catch up." Taoist Chu felt that it made sense. He suddenly remembered something and turned to stare at Taoist Wen. "Junior brother, don't you have the sea-traversing flying shuttle given to you by your master? Did you bring it with you today?" Taoist Wen slapped his forehead and said, "That's right. How could I have forgotten about it?" He rummaged around in his sleeve for a while and finally took out a talisman. Priest Chu took it and hurriedly came to Zhang Yan. He handed it over with both hands and said, "Manor Master, this is the flying escape magic tool that Teacher Shin gave me in the past. It can help Manor Master catch up to those 3 people." Zhang Yan took a look and said with a smile, "Thank you for your good intentions, junior brother. Fellow Taoist Zhang rarely loses a battle with others. In the current situation, there is no need for me to intervene. Junior brother can rest assured." Taoist Chu was still worried. But if Yong Fu plays some sneaky tricks, it will be hard to guard against. Zhang Yan looked up at the sky and said calmly, "When the time comes, I will do it." The Taoist surnamed Jiang flew ahead. After a few miles, he looked back and couldn't help but be shocked. He had planned to shake off his opponent, but not only did Uncle Zhang not do as he had expected, he was still following closely behind. It seemed like it wouldn't take long for him to catch up. His escape technique was called Rainbow Smoke Escape Technique. He learned it from a cave by chance. With this technique, he had escaped many disasters. Other than Demon King and Crocodile he met a month ago, he had never seen anyone who could compete with him in this way. He did not expect to meet someone who was even better than him today. Just now, he had boasted in front of Yong Fu that even if he couldn't win in a head-on battle, he could use his escape technique to help him win the last round. But now, it seemed that he had been too confident. His expression changed a few times, and in the end he gritted his teeth and formed a seal. In an instant, the escape light actually sped up slightly. Zhang Boyan's eyes were sharp. He could tell at a glance that this was some kind of secret technique that could increase one's speed for a short period of time at the expense of vitality. However, he was not worried at all. The battle between the two of them was within Constellation Valley. Including the surrounding cliffs, it was only a little more than 50 miles. Where could this person escape to? All he had to do was follow them from behind, and when they ran out of energy, he would be able to easily take care of them. Taoist Jiang was not unaware of this, but just now, he saw that for some reason, Zhang Yan was not following him. Instead, Yong Fu was chasing after him with his magic multiplier. According to the rules of the battle, Yong Fu could help him stop Zhang Boyan 3 times. This was enough. As long as he could stall for 2 hours, he would win. Seeing that he was about to leave Constellation Valley, he turned around and flew in Yong Fu's direction. Not long after, the two of them were extremely close. He shouted, "Help me, Taoist brother." Yong Fu said, "Go ahead, Taoist Jiang. I'll help you stop him for a while." The Taoist with the surname Jiang flashed past him. When Zhang Boyan saw this from afar, a cunning look flashed across his eyes. He suddenly shook his body and a Yuanian clone flew out. It rolled in the air and also turned into a yellow smoke, chasing after Taoist Jiang. When Yong Fu saw that Zhang Boyan had suddenly turned into 2 people, he couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. He could only focus on one of them. With a wave of his sleeve, he shot out a fire dart. The yellow smoke circled around and dodged the fire dart. However, it seemed to have a mind of its own. After circling around it a few times, it refused to let go. Meanwhile, the other yellow smoke didn't change its direction and continued to chase after Taoist Jiang. The yellow smoke circled around a few more times before suddenly dispersing. Zhang Boyan appeared in the sky and pointed at it. A bolt of Yin lightning shot out and shook the fire dart away. Then, he glanced at Yong Fu and revealed a cold smile. With a shake of his body, over 100 devils flew out from behind him. They let out miserable cries and rushed in Yong Fu's direction. Yong Fu didn't expect Zhang Boyan to abandon Taoist Jiang and attack him instead. He hurriedly made a hand seal and forced out 2 beams of light from the high cloud above him. These were the tribulation powers of water and fire refined from the purple tribulation fruit. They were extraordinary, and with a loud bang, the dozen devils in front of him were smashed into pieces. The devils behind him seemed to recognize their power and whistled past him, circling behind him. Yong Fu's heart trembled. However, before he could turn around to deal with them, he saw that the devils he had scattered just now had actually gathered together again. Chapter 630. P.S. I came back late from dinner. There are at least 2 more hours tomorrow. Yong Fu was shocked. He had never seen such a strange technique before. That demon couldn't even refine the water and fire tribulation power. But after a moment of panic, he calmed down. He had fought many evil sect cultivators before, so he knew that even though their spells were strange and evil, most of them were afraid of lightning spells. Thus, he shouted and circulated all the magic power in his body. The strong cloud above his head trembled repeatedly, and several dozens of strong lightning bolts shot out in a row. The flashing lightning bolts fell one after another and smashed into the demonic chi, causing the demonic head that had just been gathered to explode again. However, after a moment, the scattered demonic chi seemed to gather again and actually condensed back into its original state. Yong Fu couldn't help but take a step back, and then a cold wind came from behind him. This reminded him that he was deep within the opponent's spell. When he raised his head again, he saw that the sky was filled with black wind and miserable fog, and it was difficult to see anything beyond 30 feet. His expression was solemn. He quickly took out more than 10 green absolute thunder beads. This kind of treasure was created by the combined efforts of several Yuanying cultivators. It was also obtained from the celestial city. One bead was equivalent to tens of thousands of spirit shells. It was the best at restraining evil techniques. Originally, he wanted to keep it as a trump card to help Taoist Jiang. But seeing how fierce these demons were, he had no choice but to take it out. With a flick of his hand, he tossed a dozen or so lightning beads downward. Suddenly, a deafening explosion of thunder rang out, and the approaching demons were all scattered. Then, he didn't have time to look at the result. He threw out a few fire darts. A streak of fire tore open a crack in the smoke. He seized the opportunity, activated the artifact under his feet, and dashed out. But before he could see the sky, 4 lights suddenly fell at the same time. His expression changed. He recognized that it was the 4 Dharma treasures that Zhang Boyan had just now taken out. He hurriedly put his sleeves up. With a bang, he was shaken and fell down. He raised his hand and saw that only half of his sleeve was left. His expression couldn't help but become even uglier. The Taoist robe he wore was also a treasured robe that could withstand the combined attack of the opponent's Dharma treasures. But it was difficult to protect them. He was not injured at all. It was already extremely fortunate. Howling sounds suddenly rang out in his ears. Those devils actually condensed into physical form again, but for some reason, they didn't immediately pounce on him. Instead, it kept circling around him, causing him to feel annoyed. He hurriedly activated his Fa Li and activated the treasure light that protected his body. Unconsciously, he calmed down a little and took out a bright jade bottle from his sleeve. He plugged the bottle and chanted a spell. The bottle tilted slightly and tipped outwards. After a series of popping sounds, a large cloud of thick yellow smoke came out from the bottle and collided with the devil chi. A burst of scarlet flames suddenly rose up. Wherever the flames passed, whether it was the devil chi or the black mist, they were all burned into nothingness. Zhang Boyan snorted coldly. This Taoist Yong really did have some ability, even having such a formidable treasure to protect himself. However, he was unperturbed, not a trace of anxiety on his face, nor did he make any attempt to salvage the situation. The smoke moved very slowly and only burned a few devils. The rest dodged to the side, so there weren't too many losses. As long as he went back and meditated for a few days, he would be able to refine them again with a bit of effort. Yong Fu sent the smoke everywhere, but this action seemed to be only to vent his suppressed anger. Seeing that the devils had taken the initiative to avoid the smoke, he no longer made such a futile effort. He put away the jade bottle and summoned a pearl to hover over his head. In an instant, a soft light fell down and protected his body. He might as well wholeheartedly defend himself. He had brought many treasures with him this time, and there were still a few he hadn't taken out. If he used them, he might be able to break through the blockade of the 4 treasures. However, he was also calculating in his heart. Since Zhang Boyan was here to tangle with him, he definitely wouldn't be able to pursue Taoist Jiang. After 2 hours, he would have won this battle. In fact, Zhang Boyan was thinking the same thing as Yong Fu. Although he wasn't a direct disciple of the Netherworld Spring sect and didn't have the qualifications to learn a superior technique like the illusory tribulation water of 10,000 spirits, he had cultivated the mysterious technique of connecting Netherworld and revealing divinity, which could create a Yuanying doppelganger. If the doppelganger and the real body fought together, it would be difficult for the opponent to distinguish the real from the fake if they didn't have a secret technique. The Taoist surnamed Jiang had his Yuanying doppelganger chasing after him. No matter where he ran, Yong Fu would know clearly. He was prepared to wait until the Taoist surnamed Jiang had used up most of his transcendence energy before dealing with him. As for the Grand Elder of the Mount E sect before him, he only needed to trap him here so that he couldn't disturb him. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Taoist surnamed Jiang didn't know that the one chasing after him was only a Yuanying doppelganger. He was still grumbling in his heart about why Yong Fu didn't stop this person. Previously, he had obtained a secret medicine from Yong Fu called the swamp pill. After a cultivator consumed it, they only needed to circulate their transcendence energy for a short 7 or 8 breaths to recover to their original state. However, the yellow smoke behind him was extremely close, so he didn't even have the chance to take the pill and refine it. Unknowingly, he had already flown for nearly an hour. He knew that if he continued like this, his opponent would catch up to him in less than a moment. He thought to himself, I don't know why fellow Yong couldn't stop this person just now. Fortunately, he can help me 3 times. When I turn around, I'll ask him to help me again. As long as I succeed this time, I still have some hope of victory. Thinking of this, he turned around and flew back in a circle. Zhang Boyan knew Taoist Zhang's movements like the back of his hand. When he sensed that Taoist Zhang was heading in his direction, he smiled sinisterly. Not long after, a streak of light appeared in his northern field of vision. He focused and saw that the momentum was much weaker than before. It was obvious that he had used up too much transcendence energy. This was the best time to make a move. Thus, without any hesitation, he threw Yong Fu aside and turned into yellow smoke as he flew away. The Taoist surnamed Jiang suddenly saw the endless black smoke in front of him and also sensed that something was wrong. He couldn't help but hesitate and paced back and forth in the distance for a while. In the end, he decided not to go forward and turned around, wanting to escape. However, in just this short period of time, Zhang Boyan had already caught up. He rose into the sky and waved his sleeve down. In an instant, the sky darkened, and a black cloud of devilish mist had already appeared, covering the sky within a few kilometers. The surroundings suddenly became pitch black. He couldn't even see his fingers in front of him. The Taoist surnamed Zhang's heart sank. He knew that he had fallen into the opponent's trap. Due to his cautiousness, he didn't dare to move recklessly. Instead, he stopped his body and made a few hand signs. First, he activated the protective light around his body. Then, he quickly took out a treasured umbrella. He held the handle of the umbrella and opened it up with his other hand. Then, he activated his mana and countless talismans started to circulate. Vaguely, a 3-legged golden bird could be seen flying in the air. Countless golden flames fluttered along with its wings and fell from above, creating holes in the demonic smoke in the sky. This was called the Little Golden Crow Umbrella, which he had borrowed from Yong Fu. The celestial city had stood on the Divine House Mountain for thousands of years. There were many powerful Dharma treasures in the city that could only be used by the ruler of the celestial city. For this battle, the two of them had taken out almost all the famous Dharma treasures in the celestial city. However, Zhang Boyan laughed softly. The Taoist surnamed Jiang looked mighty at the moment, but in reality he was about to lose. This person was originally skilled in flying, but now that he had stopped to fight with Zhang Boyan, he would only lose even faster. He waved his hand and a light flashed behind him. The sword, ring, nail, and tablet, the 4 Dharma treasures, flew up at the same time and spun down. The Taoist surnamed Jiang panicked. Just now, he was being attacked by the 4 Dharma treasures at the same time. He felt that he couldn't defend himself, so he thought of a way to escape. Now that he saw this scene, he didn't care if his Dharma treasures were damaged or not. He hurriedly raised the Golden Crow umbrella in his hand. But just as the 4 Dharma treasures were about to hit the umbrella, Zhang Boyan smiled strangely. He crooked his finger and the 4 Dharma treasures suddenly separated. They went around the umbrella and attacked from 4 different directions. If it wasn't a Xian artifact that had a spirit of its own, a normal cultivator could at most use 2 or 3 of them. But these 4 Dharma treasures, which were obviously only high-level spiritual artifacts, seemed to have a spirit of their own in Zhang Boyan's hands. This change was so sudden that the Taoist surnamed Jiang didn't have time to react. In an instant, the protective Dharma treasure light was smashed into pieces. But when the 4 Dharma treasures went further in, the Taoist surnamed Jiang roared angrily and used his Fa Li. The robe on his body shot out rays of light that were several feet long and actually blocked the 4 Dharma treasures outside. Zhang Boyan chuckled and lightly formed a spell. A banner flew out from the high cloud. He reached out and took it. With a wave, countless thin and withered black hands reached out from the black fog. Like black ropes, they circled around and trapped the Taoist surnamed Jiang. After a while, the rays of light on the Taoist surnamed Jiang's robe gradually dimmed. It was obvious that his Fa Li was about to be exhausted. Zhang Boyan only needed to add a little more force and he could burn this person to death. All the essence and blood in this person's body would belong to him. But after this tempting thought turned over in his mind a few times, he finally gave up. As long as he defeated this person, this battle would be considered a victory. Under the witness of the various sect leaders of the Divine House Mountain, Zhang Yan would be able to smoothly take over the Divine City. But if the opponent died, it would add many unexpected variables. This was not worth it. At this moment, there was a stir in the demonic fog. Another figure of light pierced through it. It was Yong Fu, who was unrestrained and had rushed out. When he was in midair and saw the scene in front of him, an indescribable melancholy arose in his heart. He let out a long sigh and slowly flew up. When he was 300 feet away, he saw 4 transcendent artifacts flying in the air and blocking his way. He didn't advance any further. Instead, he cupped his hands at Zhang Boyan and said, "Please release fellow Taoist Jiang, Zhang. I admit defeat." Perhaps someone else would think that the outcome was already a foregone conclusion, but Zhang Boyan was extremely shrewd and ruthless. Earlier, Taoist Yong had said that he could help Taoist Jiang 3 times in a critical moment. Naturally, the deception in his words counted, so Zhang Boyan remained unmoved. He waved the banner and dragged the Taoist surnamed Jiang in front of him. He grinned hideously and said, "I want you to say it yourself. Do you admit defeat?" When Yong Fu saw that Taoist Jiang didn't reveal any openings, the urge to take out his transcendent artifact and fight it out immediately arose in his heart. He could see that the Taoist surnamed Jiang was in the opponent's hands. He was afraid of accidentally injuring the Taoist surnamed Jiang, but he wasn't completely confident, so he could only give up in the end. When the Taoist surnamed Jiang saw Zhang Boyan's ferocious expression, he couldn't help but shiver. He said, This lowly Taoist is willing to admit defeat." As soon as he said this, Yong Fu's expression became dejected. He cupped his hands and said, Zhang, you've won the 3rd round. I'm willing to hand over the position of Divine City's ruler." Chapter 631. 3 days after the battle in Constellation Valley. In front of Inkheart Mountain, 2 rays of light came from the horizon. They came close in a moment and descended from the sky, landing near a clear spring on the mountainside. Then, Zhang Yan and Yong Fu walked out of the light. Zhang Yan turned around and saw that the mist in front of him was very thick. He waved his sleeve and dispersed the mist, revealing a pond in front of him. It was about a mu in size, and the ripples were clear and cold. There was also a thin curtain of water flowing down from between the rocks, gurgling unceasingly. On his left, with his back against the cliff, about 1 zhang above the ground, there was a deep and secluded cave. It was covered in lush vegetation, half concealing its mysteriousness. He could vaguely make out the 3 words, Ningyong Cave, on its upper edge. Pointing, he asked, "Master Yong, is this the entrance to the immortal city?" Yong Fu chuckled and shook his head. "No." He turned around and walked back a dozen steps until he came to an inconspicuous well. He stepped on it and said, "This is it." Zhang Yan looked carefully and saw that half of the well's railing had collapsed. The stone edge was covered in moss and mud, and there was no restriction on it at all. He nodded and said, "So that's how it is. What's real is fake, and what's fake is real. It's well hidden." Yong Fu said, "Only the Celestial City's ruler can enter and exit this place, so we have to be careful." The Celestial City was not built in an obvious place but was hidden deep inside the mountain to prevent it from being taken away by outside cultivators. Other than the main gate, this was the only way in and out. Only the ruler of the Celestial City knew about it. Zhang Yan walked around the well twice and said, "There are no restrictions here. Even though it can fool some people, it's not guaranteed." There should be some backup. Yong Fu revealed a look of surprise and praised, Zhang Jinren's guess is correct. There's also a 1,000-year-old toad spirit. It received a favor from a certain leader and volunteered to guard this place. I heard that it once received the teachings of a certain powerful cultivator. Although its face is a little ugly, its cultivation is profound. Zhang Jinren, please don't underestimate it. Zhang Yan nodded to show that he understood. Yong Fu took out an item from his sleeve and slowly handed it to Zhang Yan. He said in a low voice, "This is the city's restriction talisman, and you can enter the main control center with it. After you refine the restriction tablet, you can control the restrictions in the city. I'll give it to fellow Taoists today." Zhang Yan reached out and took it. He cupped his hands towards Yong Fu. Yong Fu returned the greeting and said, "I am no longer in charge, so it is inconvenient for me to accompany you. Jinren Zhang, farewell." After saying that, he tapped his feet and rode the wind. He floated into the clouds, and a moment later he was nowhere to be seen. Zhang Yan held the talisman in front of him and sent a stream of spiritual energy into it. With his current magical power, it was impossible for him to escape. However, with just a slight movement, he had completely refined this item and turned it into his own. Then, he tossed it upwards, and the astral cloud above him rotated slightly. He put it away. He looked down at the deep well and smiled. He made a hand seal and rose up, turning into a beam of light and leaped down. The moment he entered the water, he used the water escape technique and passed through the long well in one breath, arriving at the bottom. At this moment, his body felt light, and he realized that he was in a cave that was 1,000 feet high. This should be the belly of the mental demon mountain, and it had been hollowed out by someone using a large amount of magical power. Looking up, there were tens of thousands of pearls and jade embedded on the cave walls, and they shone brightly like it was daytime. Below his feet was a deep blue pool, and above it was an exquisite stone bridge that led deeper. He waved his sleeves and floated in. After crossing the stone bridge and passing through a few cave doors, he arrived at another cave abode. It was also spacious. There was a shallow layer of clear water beneath his feet, and there were tens of thousands of stone barricades that looked like chess pieces. There were 7 colored banners on top of them, and there were traces of greenish-purple light emitted from the banners, faintly showing the patterns of stars. As he walked, the talismans and banners resonated with each other, constantly shaking and making the rumbling sound of waves. One could imagine how powerful it would be once the restrictions here were activated. Before Zhang Yan came here, he had heard Taoist Chu's description that the immortal city was surrounded by mountains, and the inside was protected by jade stones and spiritual wood. If there was a formation formed by these banners, it could be said to be impregnable. If he did not choose to fight this time, but to forcefully seize it, it would be very difficult to succeed. However, this was also because of the desolate mountain boundary of the Divine House Mountain, and the fact that there was no abode heaven guarding it, which was why it was so heavily guarded. It was said that the immortal cities established by the Zhongtai sect were all lonely in the sky, and could be seen from thousands of miles away. Following him forward, not long after, he arrived in front of a half-moon cave door. There was a golden copper toad the size of a human squatting in front of it, and it seemed to have sensed his approach. It suddenly let out a buzzing sound and shouted, "Who are you?" Zhang Yan stopped, took out the talisman, and waved it at the golden copper toad. The voice suddenly came to a realization, so the person in charge has changed again. At this moment, the golden copper toad spouted a white gas from its nose aperture, and it spun on the ground. Then, a short Taoist with a round belly and short legs walked out, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand, and 2 mustaches above his lips. His face was bumpy and his face was ugly, but his eyes were very clear. He bowed and said, "The little demon guarding the door, Tian Chong, greets the person in charge." Zhang Yan looked at the top of the demon's head, and there were actually 3 high clouds. It was obvious that the demon's cultivation was at the 2nd level of Yuanying, and its appearance was righteous but not evil, clear and pure. He knew that this demon walked the path of qi, and should be cultivating the superior cultivation method of Xianmen, so he also bowed and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Tian Chong said loudly, "This little demon will open the door for the person in charge." He turned around, flicked the horsetail whisk, and the cave door behind him rumbled open. He pointed and said, "The place after this is an important place in the Celestial City, and many rare treasures are also hidden inside. Only the person in charge can enter, so forgive me for not being able to accompany you." Zhang Yan thought, so this door can only be opened by this toad demon. He expressed his gratitude before striding in with large strides, and he arrived at the inner room in less than a dozen steps. He swept his gaze around and noticed that this abode wasn't very large compared to the outer room. It was only around 100 meters in length and width, and there was a stone tablet at the center. It was where the mechanism of the restriction was located. Behind it was a square table, and on the table was a scroll of jade scrolls. Against the wall, there was a stone cabinet, and the layout was very simple. Zhang Yan walked to the front of the stone tablet, took a few glances, and walked around to the table. He picked up the scroll of jade scrolls and slowly opened it. He looked at it and found that what was written on it was the incantation to refine this tablet, and he had to follow it to completely control the formation. Because the incantation wasn't complicated, and there were only 100 sentences, he only glanced at it a few times and memorized it. Only then did he come to the front of the mechanism tablet. He slapped his hand on it and poured the mana in his body into it. As he walked according to the incantation, the tablet let out a series of rumbling sounds, and then the entire cave shook as if it would collapse at any time. However, he seemed to have expected this, and his expression didn't change at all, and his movements didn't stop at all. After about a moment, the trembling of the tablet slowly calmed down, and then there was a loud sound. Light appeared, and 8 flag doors flew out around him. Zhang Yan looked around and nodded slightly. From this moment on, he could be considered to have the Celestial City in his hands, and he could use this flag door to go to any place in the mountain. He chanted a few incantations and pointed at the tablet. It floated like a water mirror, and the various scenes inside and outside the mountain appeared. After looking for a while, he saw Taoist Chu's figure. After thinking for a moment, he walked towards one of the flag doors. In an instant, the scenery in front of him changed, and he was already at the foot of Inkheart Mountain. Before Zhang Yan and Yong Fu went together, he ordered Taoist Chu to wait here. At this moment, when he suddenly saw Zhang Yan appear in front of him, he was stunned at first, and then he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He said, "Has the Manor Head taken control of the Celestial City's mechanism restriction?" Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. "Yes." Taoist Chu was overjoyed and he couldn't help but say, "It's been more than 200 years. After Master Shen passed away, the position of Manor Head finally fell into the hands of the Deep Abyss sect." He couldn't help but be excited. After Zhang Yan took the position of Manor Head, the Deep Abyss sect could naturally occupy 70% of all the cultivation items in the Celestial City. It was equivalent to gathering the power of dozens of sects to support one sect. It could be seen just by looking at how prosperous the mountain sect had been over the years. If the Celestial City head was a bit more ruthless, he would suppress those sects and never let them have the possibility of threatening him. The reason why Yong Fu treated the Deep Abyss sect like this, and did everything possible to push them out, other than the fact that Songzhu Peak was a blessed land, and he had the intention to occupy it, was because he was afraid that the Deep Abyss sect would obtain some mysterious technique from Shun Baishuang, and someone would come out to compete with him for the position. After being happy for a while, he seemed to suddenly remember something, and he slapped his forehead. "I almost forgot about the important matter." He took out a stack of jade talisman from his sleeve and handed it over, saying, "Manor Head, there are a total of 37 sects on Mount Shenwu. Today, 36 sects have already sent over their names and genealogies. Manor Head, please have a look." This jade talisman was the name list of the personal disciples and elders of each sect on Mount Shenwu. If the Celestial City had changed hands, they would have to send this item, and this was a sign of respect. In the future, whenever these sects recruited disciples, expanded their sects, or increased their cultivation, they would have to send him this. Zhang Yan accepted it calmly. After looking through it, he asked, "Which sect did not send over their genealogies?" Taoist Chu replied, "This sect is called the Longxiang sect. I heard that, like Master Shen and Manor Head, they also came from the outer seas. However, they have never interacted with other sects, and even in this battle, they did not send any disciples. When Sage Yong was around, he never intervened, so this little brother does not know their background. Manorhead, please tell us how to deal with them." Zhang Yan's thoughts turned. The celestial city head of the sect was equivalent to the sect master of the various sections. Normally, they would not allow such a maverick sect to exist in their territory, but this Longxiang sect could do so. There must be a reason for this. Chapter 632. A month after Zhang Yan took charge of the celestial city, the Hanyuan school started a large-scale construction project on Sangju Peak. They built palaces, pavilions, and residences. They also set up a formation 100 miles away from the mountain gate. The atmosphere of the school was instantly renewed. On top of the mountain, in a 7-story pavilion, Zhang Yan sat alone in front of a table. He held a Taoist book in his hand and was engrossed in reading it. This was a book that recorded the customs and people of various places in the Donghua continent. Because the Donghua continent was a mixture of celestial beings and mortals, there was a lot of trade between celestial cities. Therefore, the items used by cultivators were recorded in great detail. In order to achieve Yuanjin Dharmakaya, other than Jun Yang's Qi of Essence, he also needed the White Moon Essence. If he were to rely on his own strength, even if he could search the world for it, he did not know how long it would take. Fortunately, after he entered the celestial city, he did not have to worry about many common elixir materials. He could buy them from other countries. However, there was still a problem. To make the white moon fruit, other than a large number of rare flowers and herbs, there were also many rare spiritual treasures. He could only rely on himself to slowly inquire and search. He thought in his heart, with my current cultivation, I'll be able to reach the second level of the nascent soul realm in 30 to 40 years at most. After that, I'll need to use the Qian Kun spiritual qi to cultivate. The medicinal pills that Senior Marshal Brother Zhou gave me are only enough for a year at most. If I can't find them by then, my cultivation will definitely be delayed. I need to plan ahead. After thinking for a while, he put down the jade scroll and stood up to the window. He looked out of the mountain with his hands behind his back. At this moment, Jing Yu's voice came from outside. "Master, Taoist Chu wants to see you." "Zhang Yan, invite junior brother Chu in." Chu Mu walked into the pavilion and bowed respectfully. Then he said, "Master, there have been many disciples coming to seek Tao. Because you have been in seclusion for a few days, I did not dare to make the decision on my own. Therefore, I arranged for them to stay in the new courtyard at the foot of the mountain. I hope you can tell me how to deal with them." Zhang Yan turned around and asked, "Who are they?" To know about the change of ownership of the celestial city, they must not be ordinary people. Chu Mu replied, "They are all disciples of nobles and nobles. They often interact with the sects in the mountain." The Divine House Mountain was divided into east and west with Luduan Mountain as the boundary. There were few people in Dongya. Most of their residences were in the Western Kingdom, and they were divided into 9 countries and 76 strongholds. They had a population of more than 12 million, and they frequently interacted with the Taoist cultivation sections. Most of them were related by marriage. After the nobles of the imperial clan learned that the immortal city had changed owners, all of them acted upon hearing the news and sent their disciples to the mountain to cultivate. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. These people were all disciples. They wanted to establish a relationship with him to ensure the prosperity of their clan. At the same time, they could also help the Deep Cave sect spread their roots throughout the mountain world. It was a win-win situation, so they could accept it. In the past, when Shen Baishuang was still around, he thought that those who were born in the royal family were used to wealth and could not endure the hardships of cultivation. Therefore, the sect only accepted disciples from poor families. For example, Chu Muron's ancestors had been gathering herbs for generations. However, in Zhang Yan's eyes, since they were establishing a sect, they should be treated equally regardless of their background. As long as one had the heart to cultivate, they should be given a chance. Therefore, he said, I want to follow the example of Qinsong and establish an upper and lower house. All disciples who come to cultivate will first be arranged to enter the lower house to learn the scripture of pure breath. Those with good aptitude and a firm Taoist heart can enter the upper house to cultivate. Junior apprentice brother Zhao can arrange this. Chu Muron pondered for a while and said cheerfully, Junior apprentice brother Zhao is calm and generous, so you should be able to do this. I will arrange it later. He paused for a while and said, one more thing. Among the 37 sects in the Divine House Mountain, there are 7 that own shellfish farms. Every year, they can obtain more than 10,000 shellfish. Since the Celestial City has changed owners according to the rules, we can collect the shellfish once. I wonder if we can do this? Zhang Yan turned around and raised his eyebrows. If that's the case, there are only 70 to 80,000 shellfish a year? Chu Muron said with a smile, it seems to be a little less. Most of the shellfish used in Dongsheng continent are shellfish. These shellfish that are nurtured from spiritual veins can often be counted as 10, so the number is not small. Apart from 30% that can be kept, the rest have to be handed over to the Celestial City. At this point, he said regretfully, with the help of the Celestial City, Mount E sect has more than 1,000 disciples in the past 200 years. If there is no major change in our Hanyuan sect, we will not be able to reach this number in the future. It's a pity that the Beima Ocean domain has been occupied by the demon tribes from outside, so we can no longer collect the shellfish. Otherwise, our sect would be more prosperous. Zhang Yan laughed heartily and said, time passes and the world changes. Junior apprentice brother, do you know that you can't do it? Just now, the Celestial City has changed owners. The people's hearts are not stable, so let's forget about it this time. Taoist Chu's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, Senior apprentice brother, do you have any other plans? However, since Zhang Yan did not continue to talk about it, he did not dare to ask more. He bowed and said, I have nothing else to do, so I dare not disturb the cultivation of the headmaster. I will take my leave now. Zhang Yan said gently, Junior apprentice brother, there are many things to do in our Hanyuan sect. Because of my cultivation, there are many things that I can't take care of. I can only ask you and my 2 junior apprentice brothers to be more attentive. Taoist Chu quickly said, Senior apprentice brother, you are too serious. As an elder of the sect, it is natural for me to share the headmaster's burden. As he finished speaking, he bowed again and left. After he went out, he was greeted by a gust of cool wind. He took a deep breath and felt refreshed. Looking at the mountain gate becoming more prosperous day by day, even though he had to take care of the common things every day, he still enjoyed it. He stamped his feet and a smoke rose up, turning into a white mist and flying away. Zhang Yan returned to the back of the table and sat down. After thinking for a moment, he drew a talisman with 2 fingers and flicked his fingers. A spiritual light shot down the mountain. Not long after, the Wang sisters came together and bowed to him. They said in unison, Disciple greets master. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Rise. Have the 2 of you studied the geography of the Dongsheng continent in detail these few days? When Wang Kating heard this, her beautiful eyes lit up. She rushed to say, Kating and sister have been studying the geography of the continent in the Celestial City. There are a total of 132 scrolls. As long as it is in the map, we have memorized it. Zhang Yan nodded and said, That's good. You can set off in a few days to search for medicine. The Dongsheng continent is not like the Donghua continent. When you travel, there is no help from fellow Taoists. Even though Kaiwei has the protection of a true artifact, you still need to be careful. I have a cloud-piercing shuttle here. I will give it to the 2 of you to use as a means of transportation. He pointed with his finger. A spiritual light flew into Wang Kating's sachet. The 2 sisters quickly knelt down and thanked him for his kindness. Zhang Yan gave them a few more instructions before ordering them to leave. After that, He started to cast a spell and closed the forbidden door of the Seven Treasures Great Pagoda Pavilion. He then cast a few more spells and lit up the 7 pearls in the pagoda one by one. Not long after, threads of spiritual energy continuously gathered on the praying mat beneath him. This treasure was originally a gift from Shun Baishuang. It was originally the treasure of Cui Yuming, the palace master of the Duzhen Hall. It sat in this pagoda, as if he was in a blessed land. In addition, Songzhu Peak was the place with the thickest spiritual energy in the Divine House Mountain. Even though it was not as good as Xiaoyu Heavenly Lake, it was not too far off. After Zhang Yan sat down, he flicked his sleeves. He took out the 2 ice boulder stone embryos. During the battle, in order to get this item from Yongfu, he did not hesitate to admit defeat. It was because this item was related to Bai Yuang. The ice boulder stone embryos were not rare. Instead, the 2,000-year-old scorpion spiders were of great use to him. If this kind of ancient poisonous insect was fed with a strange fruit called the silk lotus seed, after a dozen years, a flawless pearl would slowly condense in its stomach. It was called the Panchan pill, and it was one of the ingredients to refine the white moon heroic fruit. Other than ancient mutated poisonous insects, it was best if they had cultivated for more than 100 years. However, this pair of scorpion spiders had cultivated for more than 1,000 years. Although their vitality had been greatly damaged because of the ice plate, as long as he could refine the ice plate and save them, it would not be a problem for him to nurture the pill. Zhang Yan aimed at the ice plate in his right hand. The astral cloud above his head shook, and he used the true light of fire to wrap it firmly. He used his dermic powers to slowly refine it. Although the ice plate was a miraculous object, it could not withstand his mysterious technique. In just a moment, it slowly melted like wax. However, he needed to protect the scorpion spider inside, so he had no choice but to concentrate, unwilling to make the slightest mistake. After 6 hours, the entire ice plate was completely melted, leaving only the scorpion spider in place, lying there motionlessly. Zhang Yan was not anxious. He watched attentively. Since this item was used by Yongfu during the battle, it should not be an inanimate object. After a moment, the scorpion spider moved slightly. After a while, there was a rustling sound in the inner chamber. The 6 pairs of limbs under its body slowly opened up, supporting its body. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. With a flick of his finger, dozens of shell pearls flew out and landed on the ground. The scorpion spider was immediately attracted by the shell pearls that were rich in spiritual qi. It opened its mouth and swallowed them. However, it had only eaten a few pearls when its body suddenly trembled. It staggered a few steps forward and fell to the ground. Its body shriveled at a rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a ball of dry skin. It was obvious that its vitality was exhausted and it was completely dead. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. This poisonous insect had been sealed in the ice for more than 1,000 years, so this result was not unexpected. Fortunately, there was still one more, so he could try again. If it did not work, he could only leave the mountain and search for it himself. This kind of ancient poisonous insects usually gathered in one place and were extremely difficult to catch. As for those species that liked to live alone, their cultivation level was usually very high. If a cultivator had not reached the Yuaning realm, he would only be courting death if he went there. He fixed his eyes on the last ice plate. Once again, he used his mysterious technique and released a true light of fire to refine it. This time, it was much faster than the last time. In less than 4 hours, the ice plate was completely melted. When Zhang Yan saw that it was almost done, he retracted the true light of fire. But at this moment, he saw a black shadow suddenly sprang up and headed straight for his face. This scorpion spider had just escaped and it became ferocious and was eager to bite people. However, Zhang Yan's spirit was lifted. He smiled and said, "Good timing." His body did not move. A yellow light flew down from above and firmly pressed it to the ground. The scorpion spider's head struggled continuously. Its ferocious mouth trembled and made hissing sounds. Just now, there were still a lot of shell pearls scattered on the ground by Zhang Yan. A few of them just happened to be next to the scorpion spider's mouth. It realized that it could not break free from the shackles. So it bent down to swallow them. But after eating a few pearls, it suddenly trembled and let out a shrill cry. It was like the scorpion spider on top of it. Its body shriveled rapidly and finally stopped moving. Zhang Yan could not help but frown. Could it be because it swallowed the shell pearls? He thought about it carefully and dismissed this thought. This kind of poisonous insect was also psychic. If it was harmful to its body, it would not eat it even if it was forced. He shook his head. The two scorpion spiders were dead. Although he felt that it was a pity, he was not really disappointed. He raised his hand and was about to melt these two things. But at this moment his movement paused. He saw that the scorpion spider's body suddenly split outwards as if it was tearing a piece of paper. Something slowly crawled out from inside. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.